Each year, Microsoft Research hosts hundreds of influential speakers from around the world, including leading scientists, renowned experts in technology, book authors, and leading academics, and makes videos of these lectures freely available.
Welcome, my name is Ben Lauer, and if you're just coming in, there is pizza out back here, so please help yourselves. I work in the Windows Phone team. I'm the host of XAPfest. I'm a co-sponsor with Microsoft Research for the Hawaii Intern XAPfest, as we're calling it, this summer. So is everybody in the room here an intern? Yes? Nobody? Everyone's an intern? Cool. Well, I hope your summer's going well so far. I was an intern a few years back, so I know how fun it is. Hopefully you're having fun. I put the schedule up here just as a reminder. So if you haven't started building an app and you want to enter the contest, it's not too late, but I do want to impress upon you that the time to start is now. The apps need to be published in the marketplace on August 6th. So that is the deadline, and the first deadline there in the red box. And then after apps are submitted, we're going to take a few days. We're going to judge all the entries, and we're going to then get it down to the 8 finalist apps who will all present on August 14th. Do we have any questions just before we start with our presentations about the contest or loaner phones or anything? Yeah, Dan.
For semifinalists and finalists, what are your guys' plans for people who are not going to be here?
So the question was, when's your last day?
August 4th or August 3rd.
Yeah, so Dan's question is, hey, I'm not going to be here. I'm leaving August 4th. What do I do? So our arrangements for that actually, if you make the final, so let me start there. You will have a video that will be produced by the Microsoft Research AV video team. They do a great job. And so, even in the final event, we'll show, I think it's like a 60-second video, and that's sort of the presentation to the audience and the judges, and then you would come out for like Q&A. And so we did that partially to make it fair for anybody who wouldn't be here. So the plan that we have is when you registered, you put in your end date, hopefully. And what we're going to do is we're going to proactively work with anybody who's leaving early, and we'll have the videos done ahead of time. So I think the first exit date for interns is July 27th, and then it happens kind of every week after that. So we will work with you to make sure that you have your video done before you leave. And then if you do make the finals, we'll just set up like a link or a Skype call, and then you can participate remotely in the judges' Q&A that way. And we had a guy do that last year. So I got time for another question. If anybody has, yeah.
How can you obtain a loaner phone?
So the question was, how can you obtain a loaner phone? Have you been to our SharePoint site for the contest?
Yeah.
Okay. So if you go there, there's actually an FAQ at the bottom, and it says, hey, how do I get a loaner phone? Essentially, what you need to do is you need to fill out the registration survey. Just your name, your end date. Tell us your App Hub ID, like when you sign up in App Hub. And then we have an admin who's working with us named Tam, who sits in this building, and he'll make arrangements with you. So you just need to email him and then make arrangements to pick a phone up.
My teammate filled out a form, and he has Windows Phone, so he clicked no on the checkbox saying, do I need a loaner phone? But I, however, need one. So do you want to go back or change that?
You could fill out another survey. I think there's probably a bug in our survey process. I think we kind of expected that it would be one phone per team. But if you guys are doing something that needs 2 phones, you could just fill out another survey. That might be the easiest thing to do. But just email Tam and we'll take care of that. Anyone else? All right. So we've got Sean Henry from the DevPlat team. And he's going to talk to us about getting started with Windows Phone development using Silverlight. So I'll turn it over to Sean. Which one are you on here? Laptop one.
Yeah. Is this guy on? Can you guys hear me all right? All right, so yeah, it's been said. My name is Sean Henry. I'm a program manager on the Windows Phone developer platform team. So that's the team that built all the nice frameworks of Silverlight and XNA, and we work with the dev div to build the tools that you use to build Windows Phone applications. And just kind of to get started, how many of you guys have like started your project already and have thought of stuff? A couple of you. How many of you guys have used Visual Studio before? Okay, most of you use Visual Studio. How many of you guys have built phone apps before, Windows Phone apps? Okay, so I'll start off fairly slow, but then I'll start cruising through some stuff later. So yeah, we'll do Silverlight, overview, navigation, the application lifecycle, talk a little bit about data binding, and then some of the features that you might want to use in your app background tasks, push and tiles, camera and sensors. So to start off, how many of you guys are using Windows Phone right now? You can be honest. Some of you using iPhone, that's okay. I think, I've been on the team since kind of the very end of 7. And, one of the things we sort of did when we were first starting with Windows Phone is we sort of looked at the other phones that are on the market, and we got, iOS and Android, and these guys not doing so well these days, BlackBerry and Palm. And basically, we said, well, these are just all a big grid of icons, and it's actually not really that inspiring. We want to do something that's different, right? So we came up with this Metro UI. We were actually the first Metro UI when our friends at Windows sort of copied us, and we're happy for them, but we were there first. And so we designed this whole Metro UI around having sort of a different experience, sort of let your content come through. So one of the things you'll see with Windows Phone, so Metro is kind of we call it our design language. So it's all of the ideas and concepts we use for the UI in Windows Phone. Our marketing team would call it clean and light, open, content, not Chrome. So that means Chrome is like little things that tell you where there's a button, like an outline of stuff or lines under hyperlinks. We don't do any of that. Emotion through motion. Okay. Great typography. We actually invested a lot in fonts at Microsoft. There's a font called Segoy, which you'll see used everywhere now. We actually paid a bunch of money to have that font developed. It's ours. It's uniquely ours. And of course, I guess we're honest. One of the things is a couple things, to me more about Metro, and I'm kind of getting to a point here, is that we call Metro authentically digital. And that sounds a little bit like a buzzword, but what it means is that, it means all of these things. It means that it's really just about the content sort of shining through. And it's easiest to sort of contrast that with what you see sort of on some other platforms. So does anyone know what like skeuomorph means? Have you guys heard skeuomorphic, anything like that? Frills. Was that frills? Like paper frills. Yeah, so it's like when you have like an e-reader application and you turn the page and the page curls over and it turns like that, or you have like leather-bound stitching at the top of a calendar app. You won't see any of that kind of stuff on Windows Phone. The content is, it's just about the content, which is good and it's bad. I mean, it's good, I think, because it's very clean and simple to use, but it means that if you don't think about design, your applications will look pretty ugly. So kind of my first point here is think about design when you're building your applications. Look at some of the applications on the marketplace. Look at the sort of first party, the built-in experiences on the phone, and really sort of base your app off of that. And I think Corinna is doing a session later or she's already done one?
Last week, and it was recorded and it's available.
So you should definitely go take a look at that if you guys haven't already. We have a design studio that talks about a lot of this stuff. And they can give you some guidelines. Certainly having a good-looking app, I'm sure will help you. But sort of on with the show a little bit. How many of you guys have downloaded and installed the tools? Most of you. So if you go to msdn.com, you can, or I think still create.msdn.com works as well. You can go and find the tools, and you can download them. There's kind of two pieces to the to the Windows Phone tools. There's a designer called Blend, and there's Visual Studio, which is the compiler and the linker and the integrated development environment. And so Blend is really, I got cut off a little bit. So Blend is really what you want to use, or that you might want to use if you're doing your UI, just your UI prototyping. It's designed for if you have teams where there's this person who's only doing design and not doing coding, or doing design and a little bit of coding, a little bit of interaction. So they can work exclusively in Blend, and they can build UIs, and then move them over to Visual Studio later. Now you can actually build projects in Blend, and it's actually the same project format as Visual Studio. So you can go, you can do that. And actually, where I end up using Blend the most is if I want to like figure out, make an animation look right, or get some of the layout to look right. I'll often do it in Blend, and then copy that piece, that bit of code, which you can go get from Blend and move that over to Visual Studio. I like using Visual Studio more. Some people like Blend a lot for design, but that choice is yours. The other option, is Visual Studio. All the demos I'm going to do today are going to be in Visual Studio. Visual Studio has a much less rich designer, and it's got this, if you're scared of code, hopefully you're not here, but it's got code, it's got XAML, and those kind of things in it. So you can choose either one. I would choose Visual Studio for the most part. Blend is kind of fun to test out UI. Yeah, so this is just rehashing all this stuff. So now what I'm going to do is give you guys a quick tour of the tools. So if you install Visual Studio, you'll get just if you install it off of MSDN, you'll get these Express tools right here. And you can also, if you're using Pro for your day job, you can use that as well, and these will sort of plug into those. And what I'm going to show you here, if you have just the Express tools, these are the only project types you'll have. If you're using Pro and you install this on top, you'll see a lot more stuff on the left. But under C#, you'll see Silverlight for Windows Phone, and if you click on that, you'll get this list as well. So there's a whole bunch of different types here. Windows Phone application is kind of the most basic one. It's kind of a Hello World application. And then there's another different types. I'll show you these a little bit later, but you can jump right in and build panorama applications. So if you look on the phone, things like the People Hub, where you have that nice picture in the background, and you have your content that sort of slides across the top. You can use that as a template to start from there. Pivot is also nice. If you have sort of data and you want to show different sort of views on that data, you can use the Pivot applications. These are just nice starting points. There's nothing restricting you from adding a pivot to a regular phone application or a panorama or mixing those two, other than making it hard to use. But these are just kind of good places to start. And I'm going to start quickly with, yes?
Do they only work in portrait mode, or do they also work in landscape mode?
Panorama only works in portrait mode. Pivot, I think, will work in landscape. We can actually, you want to just try that? I'm trying to remember now. Actually, yeah. So I could have done a simple application, but I will do a pivot here since you asked. And so what we've got here when we launch this, when we start this project, is we've got, on the left, we've got our designer, which is a visual representation of our UI. On the right, we have the XAML. How many of you guys are familiar with XAML? Some of you. So XAML is the declarative UI language we use all over the place at Microsoft. It's a little bit different between different technologies. This is closest to XAML for Silverlight. And it's a markup language, so it looks a little bit like HTML. It's basically a tree of all your UI elements. So you can see here we got a phone application page at the top, and there's a layout grid, and then a pivot control, and those things are all laid out in there. And then on the right, we have our project with all the files associated with the project, and then properties, different controls. I'll show that later. And then when we actually run, what happens is it gets run in what's called the Windows Phone emulator, which is not actually an emulator. It's a simulator. It's actually running an x86 version of the OS, so it's fast, which is nice, because trying to emulate these fast phones would be slow. And when you launch, you get your sample application. So This one's got a pivot, which will switch between the two. And just to see if this actually works, we can rotate here. And actually, so that doesn't work, but we didn't actually check this. Yeah. Support orientations. So I'll show you how to do this later. So there we go. So pivot does work in landscape. So quickly what I did there is I just in the markup, I set it originally in the template, it said the only supported orientation was portrait, and I changed that to portrait or landscape. We'll go back to a Hello World application now so we can sort of continue. So this application is a little bit simpler. One thing, so when you start a new project, you'll get this dialog that says, do you want to use 7.0 or 7.1? You guys want to use 7.1. 7.0 is if you're trying to build an application that's compatible with non-upgraded versions of Windows Phone. There are not very many of those since we upgraded all of our Windows phones to 7.5. So you definitely want to do that. So 7.5 and 7.1 are basically the same thing. That's just a quick tip. So sometimes you'll see things as 7.5 and sometimes as 7.1. 7.5 is our customer name. 7.1 is the platform version. You see the same sort of thing in Windows, how like Windows 7 is actually version 6.1, whatever. So here is a Hello World sample application. This one's a little bit simpler than the pivot, so we can see what's going on. So what we have on the XAML side is we have this page called mainpage.xaml. Bunch of stuff up here you don't need to worry about yet. It's got a grid to use for layout with 2 rows defined. The first row here has these 2 elements, the application title and the page name. And then there's nothing in the second grid, which is the content panel. A stack panel, someone asked me this, I think last time I did this. A stack panel is just something that allows you to, instead of arbitrarily placing controls, it keeps them sort of stacked properly, which is helpful especially if you're doing orientation changes. It'll keep things in the center. I'll show you that with actually buttons in a second. So the first thing you'll want to do is you want to add controls. So there's a couple ways to do this. The easy way is to go over to the toolbox over here, and you can see all the controls that are available. Images, more grids, rectangles, radio buttons, or regular buttons. And we can just drag stuff over from here into the UI, and it will show up. But if we are feeling adventurous, we can also add them like this. And we get nice IntelliSense that helps us out. Now the interesting thing, see, because I didn't specify any size or anything, it's taking up the whole page. And so this would be a good place. I mean, we could put in a height. And a width. But it's still not, getting placed where we would want it to. So this would be a good situation here where we might want to stick both of these guys in a stack panel. Because the reason why this guy is getting placed in an arbitrary location is, and we can actually do the same thing with this guy if we move him, but what happens when we do that is it adds these nasty little margin guys, which basically kind of force the control to be where you want it to be. And if you do this, what ends up happening, again, if you rotate the phone into another orientation, or if you change your layout a little bit, those don't really work so well because the controls get squished and these are absolute margins. So another pro tip is don't use those margins. Instead, stick things in a stack panel. And we can just move these guys in there. And we can get rid of the margin. And this guy, we can get rid of his horizontal alignment too. And so now they show up nicely centered, stacked, They look pretty good, and they'll also work fine if we rotate to landscape. So that's adding buttons. Now I suppose what you want to do is have those buttons do something when you click on them. So again, we can use the UI. So we can go over here into this properties pane, and you can see all the properties that you can set on the button. So we can change things like height here, which we've already set, and width and so on, vertical alignment, which actually we don't want anymore. So we'll just get rid of that one. And we can also hook up to events. So there's a bunch of events we can listen to on the button. The most interesting one for buttons normally is click. So we can just type in here, whatever you want to call your event. And now it's popped us over into the C# side and it's created a little event handler for us. The other way we can do that is, again, like always, you can just start typing, click, and then we can say we can use that one, or we can hook up to our own event handler, and it will create one for us. It doesn't have the best choice of names. So every XAML page is backed by a C# page behind it. So this is called the code behind. It used to be called the code behind page. And so this is the code that sort of backs up that page. And so this is where you can actually put in what you want to do when those buttons are clicked. So for instance, so those buttons are hooked up to these event handlers. If we want to talk to if we want to perform some action on the elements that are in the foreground in XAML, we can access anything that has a name associated with it. So I've added the template has a name added to these text blocks. You can put a name on the stack panel or the grid. Anything can have a name on it, just about anything. And we can then modify them. So I can say page title shows up nicely in IntelliSense. I can take the text property and I can set it to hello everyone. And then we can build this, which gets built, deploys to the emulator. Where did you go? Come back. And if we click on this button, text changes to hello everyone. Awesome. Any questions about that? That's pretty straightforward, right? Where's page title defined? It's defined in the XAML. So because I added a name, so what's actually happening, if you're really interested, is there's actually, you'll see it in your build directory. Let's see if it's in here. There's a mainpage.xaml.g.cs, which is the generated code for the XAML. So this is actually something the XAML interpreter will then convert into C# code, and all the elements will get names, and if you've named them something, you'll be able to access them from the C#. So it's defined in the XAML is a short answer. Yeah?
How come some of the attributes have X colon in front of them, or XMLS or something like that?
Yeah, so I can get into that a little bit more later. I can show you an example. But that sort of comes from up here. So this is kind of the heritage of this being based on XML, is you have to define these namespaces. For the most part, most stuff is in that default namespace, the XAML one at the top, so you don't have to put a namespace in front of it. But if it's a property that is not there, or if it's an element that's not there, then you have to use the namespace. Name is one of those. I don't know if there's anything else in the template that uses those. Oh, you can see the phone application page at the top is in the phone namespace. And what those do is they resolve to different assemblies, different DLLs that have those controls defined in them. So I'll show you a little bit later with maps how that works, because maps is in a different control also, if we get there. Yeah?
Is there anything wrong if you use the mouse and the toolbar for most of the buttons and stuff like that?
So you mean use the toolbox?
Yes.
It's mostly okay. I mean, it's if you've ever done any design with HTML or anything like that and used any graphical designer, it's the same sort of caveats and potential issues. Often things don't flow as well if you resize them, if you change the orientation, because when you use the toolbox, it places them where your mouse pointer was. And you can end up having things maybe not aligned quite right because you've aligned them with the mouse. So I always like having things lined up with stack panels and grids and stuff like that, but there's no reason you can't use the toolbox.
But you could use a stack panel with mouse tool.
I don't know if the stack panel is in the toolbox. Was it in there? Yeah, it's in there. So yeah, you could add that, and then I think you add these guys like that to it. And you can always check if it shows up there. So yeah, there's no reason not to. It just depends what you like. That looks pretty ugly. Let's get rid of that. Oops, redo. All right. Any other questions? Yeah.
Create UI in the runtime?
Yes, absolutely. So if I wanted to create, I can show you that actually real quickly. That's kind of a neat. So if we name this stack panel, so I'm just going to add a name to it. What we can do in here, you should always wait till after you initialize the component. Actually, we'll do it in here. So we can say my stack panel, and it's got children, and you can add a add new button. Actually, I should do button just to show you guys how this works, and then we can set some properties on it. Content equals. That may be enough. So the only sort of downside of doing it in code is sometimes there's a bunch of stuff that gets generated from the XAML. So there may be some properties in here that are not there. Button's kind of a tricky one. Some things are easier to add than others. Let's see if this works. So it added that button, so you can add them all programmatically. So yeah, the only thing to be careful of though is sometimes some of these properties have to be defined or the control won't load. And it'll just depend on the control. It'll throw an exception, but it's normally an obscure exception that's not always obvious what's going on. But for the most part, that works. Most things work that way. Actually, everything works that way. It's just you got to make sure you define everything. Yep.
You have to define all these namespaces in every page?
Yeah. No, the templates will have them in there for you. So you actually don't have to, in practice, you don't have to worry about them that much. And actually, that's the next thing I'll show you is if you want to add another page. So the application model in Windows Phone is page-based. So for Silverlight applications, so you have multiple pages that you navigate between, kind of just like, again, just like a web browser almost, or a website. So we can go in here, so either from here, add, or you can go up to project. We can add a new item, and we can add another page. So these are all the things we can add, classes, interface, and so on. And you can add pages, and again, these templates just have some things already set on them, like a pivot will have a pivot control in it, for instance. But we're just going to add another simple page here, and it'll show up in the right in our project as a second page. And we will just call it page 2 so that we know we're here. So that's great. We got a second page. Your next question is, how do I get to that page? And in order to do that, we use what's called the navigation service. So the navigation service is the mechanism that's used to navigate between pages within an application. So if we go into navigation service, we can then navigate to any page we want. And page navigation uses URIs. Always remember that / or it's not going to work for you. And then we just put in the name of the page we want to go to. And it's always a relative URI. Absolute means it's got like HTTP or a protocol handler on the front. And if we do this, simple as this, hopefully. We click the button, we'll now navigate to the second page. Thunderous applause, right? So We can now go back to the first page by clicking the back button. So every Windows phone has this hardware back button. We handle the page stack in the background, so you can use that. So that back button will always navigate sort of backwards in the page stack. And so the next question is, though, what if I want to go, what else can I do when I navigate? So if you're in, say we're in here, we can add another button. Go back. And we can, a little trick to get to the code is you can just do that. But actually we need to add a handler for this. Events, click, go back button. Actually, we go back button click would be more appropriate. But then we can do navigation service dot. So there's a bunch of things we can do. We can go back and go forwards, and we can navigate. So if we run this, we can now go backwards and forwards. I'm sure you guys are following along, and this will be obvious. So we go back. Now this button takes us back to the first page. So we can do it both programmatically or through the button here. Now the interesting thing is if we had to go back from this page, actually we can show that quickly, we'd actually get an exception because you can't go back from the first page you're on. You can't leave your application programmatically. But you can leave your application using the back button. Oops, sorry about that. Using the hardware back button. So for instance, what I mean by that is if I hit go back here, I actually get an exception because I can't leave the application programmatically. Yeah.
Several pages like share the same button. It's like
several pages.
Only one object of this button for different pages.
Not easily. What are you trying to do? What are you thinking of? I mean, if you want to have like the same button or the same style between pages, you can definitely do that, and you can define the button as like a user control, and you can have that defined in multiple pages. But it's not sort of the same instance of the button. You can do it if you really want to, if you sort of pull away the pages and you work with the frames, but then your navigation gets all screwed up as well. Is your question in the back there?
So it is possible to put many pages in the screen?
Not at the same time. Generally, it's only one, yeah. And you navigate between them.
And which is the container of this page?
Pages are inside a frame. Actually, I think I have a quick little slide on this.
So I can put buttons in the frame?
You can pull the page out and you work direct with the frame, but then you don't get navigation, right? So I recommend you guys all stay within the page model, because then the back, mainly because that, and then the back button does what users expect. I'll quickly show you two. Often you'll want to do something when you navigate to a page, like you want to change some content or something like that. When you're navigating between pages, the constructor only gets called the first time you navigate to the page, because once the constructor is called, page is resident in memory, and it won't get called again. But there are some events that do get called each time. So if we do protected void override unnavigated to. So there's an unnavigated to and an unnavigated from event. Wow. Must have spelled something wrong there. Unnavigated to. And I'll just add these guys here and here, and I will show you what they do. I'm just going to set some breakpoints so that these will fire. I'll just show you the order of how these work. It's fairly obvious. So when I launch, actually, I will add one here too. I'm also going to add one on the constructor of this guy. So if I'm on my first page, so you'll see, actually, we were back here, that unnavigated 2 gets called, so the constructor got called, but you guys didn't see that instead of breakpoint. Unnavigated 2 gets called, the page gets loaded. If I navigate to the next page, the constructor for that page gets called, and then the unnavigated from the previous page gets called, and then the unnavigated to for the second page gets called. But if I go back, either way, the unnavigated from gets called, actually, and we will just do this to show you that it doesn't get called. And then the constructor for main page doesn't get called because it's already been instantiated, but the unnavigated to does get called. So that's navigation within the app. That's pretty simple, I think. Where things get a little bit more complicated is navigation outside of the app. So I'll set up some more breakpoints quickly. One thing I didn't show you guys yet was there's an application class here as well. And it has a bunch, this is all already built in the template, and it's got a bunch of event handlers here for launching, activated, deactivated, and closing. And I'll show you how those guys work. So these guys get called when your application is either navigated to from a system experience or navigated away to a system experience. So that can happen if you're in the application either by the user hitting one of those keys at the bottom will navigate you away from the application, back. If you're backing out of the application, start will always take you to the start menu, and search will always take you to the search menu. So the first one that gets called is launching. So this will get called as soon as it's the first thing really that's actionable by you, or that you should put code in when your application gets launched. Then your main page gets initialized, and it gets navigated to. And now our application is running. If we hit the back key from here, we get navigated from. We're navigating away from the page. And then we get application closing, because the application is closing. So that's pretty straightforward, right? Navigated from, navigated to, application launching, and application closing. But where it gets interesting is if we start this again, and so we see the same activation model here. So we get launching, and we get constructed, and we get unnavigated to, and now we're in the page. But if I hit the start button, I get navigated from, but I get deactivated instead of launching. And now I'm at the start screen. And from here, going back to the app, I can go one of a couple ways. I can go to the start menu here, and I can click on the app, or if it's in the app list or in the start menu, and start the app. Or I can hit the back button to back into the application. And two different things will happen depending on how the user gets back into the application. If I hit back, I'll get an application activated event. If I'd gone to it from the app list, I would have got it a launching event. So what's the difference between all those? The way you should think about it is not only do applications in Windows Phone have a page model, but the whole system has a page model. And if users hit the back key, they expect to go back into the last thing they did. So if let me just show you quickly here. I'm going to remove all these breakpoints so it goes a little faster. Oh, there's no remove all in the Express version. All right. We'll just cruise through quickly. So what happens if I'm on the second page and I hit the start button. I get navigated away, and I get deactivated. Now I hit the back button. I get activated again, but now I get activated on that second page. Right? I'm not on the first page because the user expects to go back to the second page, not to the first page. If they launch it from the start menu, the user is expecting to relaunch the app again from the first page. So that's why we have these different event handlers. The activated and deactivated are from when you're going out of the application from the start menu, and then the launching and closing are from when your application is actually closing. What you should do as an application, if you get the activated and deactivated event, is you should store all your current state, either in isolated storage or in the phone application service dictionary. And then when the user backs back into your page, you should deserialize all that state and then put the user right back where they left off. In both cases, your application is potentially getting killed. So your process is restarting, but you have to put it back to the way it was before, and that's your sort of obligation as a developer on Windows Phone. That's a little complicated, so there's a complicated diagram to go with it. I swear things get a little more interesting after this. So basically what this says is that an application is running. It can obviously navigate between pages. Those are the blue boxes. And then if it's killed, it goes to the closing event. If you back out of it and launching and starting the application again. The interesting ones are the deactivated and activated. So that's if you hit the start menu. And the application then moves into this dormant state. And what happens in this dormant state is actually new for 7.5. In the original version of Windows Phone, we went right into this tombstone state, which meant your application had been killed. If you go to what the dormant state means is that we're actually going to keep your application in memory, but we might kill it at some point if we run out of memory. So the best thing to do as a developer is to assume you're always going to end up in this state, which is that your application is getting killed. But sometimes you won't, and when you don't, your application will actually switch back a lot faster. So that was like a performance optimization we did. Any questions around that? It's a little bit complicated, but it's important to have an application that sort of works properly with the navigation model on Windows Phone.
So is there any way to enforce the closing, like not let user to go back?
No.
That has security problems. Let's say you're using online banking applications, some application that you don't want to go back to. You don't want to go, you're doing like, I don't know, you're buying airline tickets, you're doing stuff like that, you don't want to go back. Well, how do you fix it?
So you don't want to go back to like a particular page?
To go back if you quit, you just want to close it, enforce the closing and shut it down completely.
So certainly, I mean, what you can do in the case of like banking is you have some secure token or something like that, and you can ditch that token and require them to log in again the next time they navigate back to that. And you'll see that with a lot of banking applications. Your application is still around, but it doesn't mean that secure data is still around, right? So take a banking application. So let's say you're on your account page, you're on your like checking account, and it shows that you have no money in your checking account or whatever, and you don't, whatever. Now, I'll get to this in a second, but let's say you don't want to show that again. As soon as you hit the start button, when you go to that deactivated event, you ditch that login token, and when you come back, you just don't show that data again, because you're reloading that data into the page. Now, the interesting thing is the question is, whether you want to do that or not. I think I would argue with you as to whether it's a change of security context when a user navigates away from that. It's not quite the same. I don't think it's quite the same as like a web browser where you might be on a public computer on a desktop or something like that. You don't want to have that still in the history. It's not quite the same with a phone, because a phone is a personal phone. You've got a PIN sometimes to unlock it. So it comes down to whether you want to do that or not. I think some banking applications do, some don't. Question here.
Is there anything like a close app method that you can call from?
You can't close your own app. No.
Can't? Oh, okay.
Well, there's one in XNA because games can do it. We generally don't recommend you close your own application. It messes with that sort of backstack because it ends up all those pages get pulled out of the backstack. So the user hits back and they end up somewhere else.
How far can you go back pushing the back button? Like, can you go like back up to like 10 applications before, or it's just like one?
Yeah, there's a limit. Eventually the system enforces it. I'm not sure what that limit is, and it can depend on how much memory there is also, how far back it'll go, but there is a hard limit, yeah. I don't know what the number is, though.
At some point, the operating system starts closing down.
Well, so there's two pieces. I mean, there's one is whether something is navigatable from the back button, whether I can get to it from that back button, and then whether it's still resident in memory. And what we do in Mango is we let stuff stay in memory, suspended in memory till we run out of memory, then we pull the last thing out of memory. So, you launch Angry Birds, and then you go do your banking, and then you go to Internet Explorer. Internet Explorer uses a whole bunch of memory, and we don't have enough left on the system, so we shut down Angry Birds. We pull it out of memory. It's suspended, it's not running, but it's still sort of available in memory, so we can get to it quickly. But if you hit back twice, even though Angry Birds is not in memory anymore, we'll reactivate it. And you'll get this activated message, and you'll have to know that even though your application has been killed, Angry Birds has been killed, you should take the user back to the level they were on and send them to the start screen. Get a question back there.
Yeah, what if you put like a unnavigated from, you say like go forward or something like that?
Unnavigated from, yes. So you can do that. You can end up in circular loops, so you don't want to do that. But sometimes you often want to do that if you have like a login page that you want to skip over the next time. Or you don't want people to back into, so you want to back up 2 pages. You can do that.
And say you're on page, like, you have 3 pages, so you go from page 1, you like click to page 2 and to page 3.
Yep.
You press back, you go back to page 2.
Yep.
If you press back again, do you go back to page 1 or
You go back to page 1. Yeah, it's a stack, so you just keep moving back in the stack. Yeah. All right, I'll move on. I think the next topic is data binding. I'm not going to get too much into this. You can choose to use data binding or not. It's super convenient. It's nice, especially if you've got a team and you got like someone working on a component. You got different people working on different components. There's a template in here, and of course, there's tons of examples on MSDN. What data binding is it's a really quick way to, instead of having to set things like you saw, setting elements, equal to something in C# each time, you can actually just do this binding. So you see down here, I just have binding down here to line 1. And what that does is behind the scenes, the system figures out where the line 1 variable is, and it binds it directly to that. So it's kind of the opposite of what the XAML generation was doing before. And you can even have it so that like when that line 1 variable gets updated, elsewhere in your code, so you do line 1 equal to foo, it will then do a property change notification and the UI will get updated. And you can see where that's happening here. So what happens in this sample is on our main page, we set this data context. This is the data context for the page, and we set it to this object called the view model. And the view model then contains a list of items, and the items have these properties, line 1, so that it will automatically then show up. It's also really nice if you want to add sample data in the designer. You can do the same sort of thing in XAML as well. Where this comes in handy is if you're doing MVVM. Do you guys know what MVVM is? Anyone know what MVVM is? One guy and a couple back there. Do you guys know what model? So MVVM is model view, view model. Do you guys know what model view controller is? Maybe more of you have heard of that. That's a little more common. MVVM is kind of Microsoft's flavor of that. Basically, the idea is try and separate your application into different things. Your model, which is kind of the piece that, if you're talking to a web service, it's the part that talks to the web service or talks to your data and has all your business logic in it. And then a view, which is your XAML, which is your UI, and then a view model, which is kind of your glue that takes the data and converts into something the view can use. Binding is really nice because it sort of takes care of this view model piece a little bit for you. And where this is really nice is if you have slightly larger teams, you can have people focus on owning different pieces, and you have contracts between the two. And then also, if you're going to test your applications, it makes it a lot easier to unit test things. And of course, all of you guys are unit testing, I'm sure. So that's data binding. You don't have to use it, but we like to push it because it's kind of cool. So that's it for sort of the core technologies. The next thing I want to talk about is the Silverlight Toolkit. This is the sort of #1 pro tip. As soon as you download the tools, go to Silverlight, go to silverlight.codeplex.com and download the Windows Phone Toolkit. Do that right away. And what's in the toolkit is a whole bunch more controls. So in Visual Studio, there weren't all that many controls. On the XAML, in the toolbox, you saw them. There are tons more in the toolkit. So this is all you get by default. If you download the toolkit and install it, you get a whole bunch more controls. You'll also get, it's open source, it's on Codeplex. So you can actually look at the code, you can see how these things are made, you can modify them if you want. And actually a really good recommendation is look at this. Most of the code in there is pretty well written. If you want to learn how to do something or understand how something works, good place to look is in the toolkit code. And I'll quickly go through some of the things that are in here. Did that deploy? We're still deploying. Deploy failed. So it's being used by another process. I already have this bad boy on here. There it is. So this is the sample application that ships with the toolkit. It's got examples of a bunch of the controls. So we've got stuff, autocomplete boxes, context menus, so tap and hold and the menu comes down. Wow, it's gotten slow all of a sudden. So you saw that, there it goes. So that drops down. Machine's gotten a little slow, but trust me, those are nice and smooth on the device. Date time pickers, if you want to have ones that look like we use on the system. You can do that. Other things that I think are really good to use on here, I mean, is obviously if you have a specific use case, like some of these date time converters and stuff. Gestures, so that you can pick up sort of swipe gestures and stuff like that. It's got some built-in stuff for that, which I think is really useful. Long list selector is great if you're doing a list. It's a lot faster than list view, and then it also has the nice headers at the top. This A at the top, and then you can do jump lists like that, like we have in the system. The other one that's really good in the toolkit is performance progress bar. You should use that. Tilt effect, you should sprinkle this all over the place. So that makes your UI sort of, see, you saw it move there a little bit. It's always nice touch, gives you feedback on your UI so the user knows that something is actionable. And then one that's really useful is to get nice page transitions, is use the transitions that are built in. Well, that one was a little fast. But you get a whole bunch of page transitions in here that are all sort of the right speed to match the system. Computer's getting a little slow. Yeah.
Will you be sharing these slides?
Yes. Yeah. So toolkit, context menu, yep, date time picker, toggle switch, awesome, great. All these things are good. Other stuff. So that's kind of Silverlight. Yes.
I wanted to ask, since we have this page model, how do we share objects between two pages? Or
right. So what you can do is you can either set them up as like a singleton. You can do that, like a static class. That's fine. A static instance. You can also have them hang off the app class. So you saw the app in here. So if we open app.cs, you can just have, if you want to have an object that's available to everyone, you can just stick it off of app here. So you can do, I don't know, string, global string, and then all your pages can have access to it here.
can you access the controls from one page from another page?
Generally,
when I click the button, something else should happen on the other page I navigate to.
Generally, no. I'm not quite sure what you're trying to do. Like, no, you can achieve what you're trying to, I think, but normally I think you wouldn't want to do that. We can talk about that later if you want. Yeah. Front here.
About the inheritance stuff, can you have like one main page and create the other pages as child of that page? And
Yes. I mean,
have access to, you know.
You can do that as well. I mean, that's actually another good point. If you want something common across all the pages, you can certainly subclass them. So you can create something between off a phone application page here, and have all your pages inherit from that instead, and you can put stuff in there. Absolutely.
If you want to move stuff between pages, you can also add it to the URL.
Oh, that's right. Yeah, if you're just trying to send data between pages, so just like I showed you the navigate to the URL, you can also put parameters on the end. So you can just say, if I want to send some parameters, you can just do like question mark, foo equals bar, and then you can retrieve that in here by, I think the navigation service has it when you get navigated to, or maybe it's under arguments. I'm not sure. I can find that later if you're interested. But
The only downside is you need to wrap in try-catch statements because it's likely to throw an error if you can't find it.
right, if the parameter's not there, it'll throw. Okay. Only got a few minutes left. I want to talk a little bit about background agents. So in Windows Phone 7 in the first version, in most cases, your application is only running when it's in the foreground. When it's navigated away from it, doesn't get any chance to execute. And we do this, of course, to save battery on the phone. If you want to do something while your application is not in the foreground, you have two options. There's a periodic agent and a periodic task and a resource-intensive task. And what those are is periodic task allows you to have some of your code wake up every 30 minutes, and you can do whatever you want for 30 seconds. And resource-intensive agent, intensive task, will, if your phone's plugged into the wall, charged and on Wi-Fi, it will launch and you can go do stuff. So periodic task is good if you want to do like a syncing operation in the background, or you want to stay logged into some service. You can do that every 30 minutes. Resource intensive is good if you want to download a whole bunch of stuff when the phone is charging and plugged in. So if you're syncing, like you have an app that does podcasts or something like that, and you're syncing a bunch of podcasts. I'll show you real quickly in code how those work. It's pretty simple. We'll take this guy, I guess. Again, we go up to project, and we can add, we go up to the solution, and we can add a new project. Also in this list here, so actually two I didn't talk about are the audio streaming and audio playback agent. Those are kind of specific scenarios if you're building something like Pandora or Spotify and you want to have your audio continue to work in the background and integrate with the play pause controls at the top. So I won't talk about those. But scheduled task is what you want if you want to do the resource intensive agent or the periodic agent. The first thing you do when you add these is you have this guy reference them so that he knows where he is. And then to add it, so what'll happen when this agent is fired is this method will get called on invoke. And in order to set this guy up, you can set him up in your main page. We use what's called the scheduled action service. Another pro tip is spell things properly. And if they don't show up, you can just do a little resolve here and it'll figure out all your usings. So actually what we want to do is let me just get this here. So if we want to do like a periodic task, first thing you want to do is you want to find it because it may already be scheduled. This is just the pattern. So we just do find my task. And if it's not there, so what this is doing is asking the scheduled action service as periodic task. If it's already been scheduled, if it hasn't, we create a new one. New periodic task with name my task. One tip for these is you always have to set the description for them. Description. And then we schedule them. Scheduled action service dot add task. And what's going to happen is this task is now going to get launched every 30 minutes. But you may ask, well, I don't want to wait around 30 minutes to debug this code. So what we also have is a fun little API that lets you do launch for test. And you give it the name. And you do a new time span of however long you want. We'll say 10 seconds. After 10 seconds, this guy will launch. And before I run this, what I'm going to do is show you one other API quickly that's kind of neat, and that's called Shell Toast. So if you want to have these things run and then have the user launch your application, get into your application, you can't actually launch your application directly, but you can show a little toast message that that they can click on to then launch your application. And these guys didn't resolve. And we can set our content equal to, actually we'll do title equal to hello, content equal to everyone. And then you can set also a navigation URI to new URI. Whoops. And this will then, come on. System dot, no, where's URI? Whatever, we won't worry about that one. Set it to URI. And then we can do toast.show. And let's cross our fingers to see if this works. So my application is going to launch. If all goes well, we don't need these guys anymore. So the scheduled task has been scheduled. I can then actually navigate away from it. That's fine, thank you. And what you'll see, actually I should have put a breakpoint in here. I'll see if it caught that. In a few seconds, what will happen is that onInvoke method will get called. And from within there, you have 30 seconds to do whatever you want. So you can see there, it's loading up. OnInvoke got called. And if we continue to run, hopefully, there we go. We got a little toast. And if we clicked on that, it would launch our application. I missed it. No, there it goes.
The application should be alive.
It should be alive?
In the background?
No, so it doesn't have to be alive in the background. It can be totally gone. And that background agent will keep firing every 30 minutes. The back.
The little alert showed up. How does it indicate it's your application? Like, so that they know what application's done?
Oh, yeah. So you saw the little icon there?
That was your application icon?
That's your application's icon, yeah. And if they tap on it, it'll launch your application. And you can specify, if you don't specify anything like I didn't specify anything here for the navigation URI because I couldn't find the namespace. If you don't put anything, it'll launch your app, but you can also put like a page in there, so you can go to like page 1 or page 2, and you can put just like in the navigation service, and it'll deep link into that page, yeah.
Is the whole 30-minute time limit hard-coded? Like, can you change that at all?
No, it's 30 minutes. If you need less than, if you don't need 30 minutes, if it's every 6 hours or something, just don't do anything. Just immediately quit. It's always 30 minutes, and it can't be any sooner than 30 minutes. Yep.
Can you have multiple scheduled agents?
No. One per app. Yeah.
Is there a way to speed that up, like for debugging?
Yeah, well, so I set it to go for 10 seconds, right?
So you can set in debugging mode.
Yeah, so what I did here was I called this launch for test API, and you give it a time span, and then that tells you how soon you want it to launch.
That actually wouldn't go into production code.
That's right, it doesn't work in production. Don't be sneaky. Pandora uses a background audio agent. So background audio agents are a little bit different. There's a template for them in there, but the way they work is they get launched right away. You can explicitly launch them, and the user controls them with. As soon as they're launched, you get those play forward back controls at the top of the screen. And if the user ever hits pause, and then after a certain amount of time, the agent then goes away as well. And the idea is we don't want on the phone sort of services and stuff running for a long time, potentially eating up battery when the user doesn't know about them. Yep.
The resource-intensive task, was that only allowed when the phone is plugged in?
Yes.
Okay.
I will quickly do, I see orange here, so I will, what would you guys prefer to see, push or maps and location?
Maps.
Maps, push. Great. We will try and do both. I'll be quick. So maps are actually really easy. We have pretty awesome map support. First thing you got to do though is it's not in the core set of assemblies, so you got to go find it. It is down here in Windows Phone controls.maps. So now it's added, and now we were talking about this earlier. We have to go deal with these namespaces. So I have to add one, XML namespace. We'll call it map. Fortunately, IntelliSense to the rescue. And we can go down and we can look for our maps one, and it figures everything out for us. And then what we can do after that is adding a map is as simple as adding a map. There we go. So we got a map. And we can actually, run this, and we can. Whoa.
Are there any defaults for it? Like, is it a default to your current location, or?
Oh yeah.
Yeah, so I can show you that in a second. Wow, come on. So this is a real map, and we can move around, and it works, and it zooms in, and it updates all the stuff eventually. But yeah, so what you want to do is you obviously want it to go somewhere. So what I'll do quickly here is I'll just show you it's hooked up to the GPS on the phone. So for that we can use the geo coordinate coordinate watcher. And he is also not in the default set of assemblies. If you ever don't know where something is, I think the fastest way is to just ping it. And so you can see this guy is in system.device.location. If it's not showing up in the search results, it'll be right here in the assembly. So you just go and you add system.devices. Right here, so that guy will show up. And we'll just new him up like this. And then what you want to do is you want to add handlers to position change. There's actually a few other things you probably want to hook up to, but for this sample, we can just have the one. And then we want to start them. So what will happen is every time the location gets changed, this guy will get updated. And what we're going to do is we're going to give our map guy a name. And we are going to set what do we want here? Wow, look at all these things. center. Yeah, there we go. Center equal to, center takes a geocoordinate E dot, which fortunately we have right in here, location, and we will also zoom in a little bit. Dot zoom level equals 16. It's a guess. And then if we run this, hopefully this works. And so this guy, the emulator will simulate GPS location. I'm not sure what it's going to pick up for this laptop, but obviously you have a phone, it'll use the GPS in the phone. That looks, it's coming. There we go. That's pretty close, right? That's my office in Studio F, so that's pretty good. The other thing you can do is you can, in the emulator, there's a little, if you click on this guy, there's a location simulator in here, and you can move things around, and that will show up in the emulator as well, if you want to simulate location. So that's maps and location. I will try and do push notifications in under 5 minutes. And then we will get to Orrin, who's going to tell you how to make your code fast. So push notifications are actually pretty similar in terms of the pattern to scheduled agents. And what push, do you guys all know what push notifications are? Anyone not know? Does anyone want? Okay. So the way push notifications work are if you want to send data to the phone to update a tile, to send one of those toast notifications, but you don't want to do it from an agent or anything from your web service, you send a push notification. And the way that works is you have some web service, you talk to our push notification server, it maintains a connection with the phone, and then it sends that data down to the phone. So you never talk to the phone directly, we do it on your behalf, and we do it in a reasonably efficient way, again, so the battery doesn't get killed. So if we want to do push notifications, we use HTTP notification channel. So we want to set up a channel. This guy, again, will resolve this. Same pattern is we look for it first. We look for it first. No. HTTP dot find. If it's equal to null, we create a new one. Depending on what we want to do with it, we actually the first thing we want to do is we want to hook up to some of these events. I'll tell you what this one is in a second. It's important. And also to this guy. Oops. And then we want to channel dot open. So again, it's very similar to scheduling. And we also want to, there's different things you can do from push. You can send a toast notification, you can send a tile notification, you can send a raw notification. If you want to do a tile or toast, you have to explicitly bind to them. So basically tell the system that you're expecting these to come in at some point. So what I will do here, I'm just going to output this, debug.write line, channel URI, perfect. We'll just get rid of this instead of breakpoint. So that's how you set up a push channel. So what this does under the hood when you set this up is it goes and talks to our push notification server, and it sends you back, it gives you back a URI, which your service can then use to talk to the device. Sometimes it takes a little while to happen. Sometimes it doesn't happen at all, but it looks like it happened here. So it gave us this big long URI here. I'll just have that output. So here it is. And what we can do is we can take that URI. I have a little web service set up here where we can type in that URI. And what this web service does is it talks to our push notification server. There's code for this on MSDN. It's a little bit more complicated to do the server side, but it's actually not that hard. And from here, what we can do is we can send notifications. First of all, we can send a raw notification, which we can put any kind of data we want in, and that will get sent down to the device. And you can see our device got activated. This is information coming from our web service, and the raw data will be in here somewhere. It's actually going to be a byte stream, so it's probably not going to show up very clearly. Well, anyways, length of 5, so you can assume it's in there. Trust me. But the raw notifications, which is what this one is, only get received if your application is in the foreground. You can send whatever data you want through here. I think you get 3 kilobytes of data, but it's only when your application is in the foreground. Kind of more interesting than these is if your application, for instance, is not in the foreground, it'll be completely terminated. User hasn't used it. You can send things like you can send toast notifications. So there's a toast that came down. This came down from our web service. You can also do things if you have the tile. Oh crap! What number were we? 8. If you pin this guy to the start menu, you can do things like you can change the count on the tile. So it says 7. You can add text. Yeah, well, I'd done that one earlier. That was cheating. But you saw that flip over to the back of the tile. So you can do a bunch of stuff to update the tiles from your web service. So you can tell, if you've got like a newsreader application, you can tell the user there's like 7 unread messages. You can put, maybe if it's a news feed or something, you put the headlines on the back. That's kind of what you can use this stuff for. I'm not going to have time to go through the next few things. And they don't work that well on the emulator anyways, so they're better to test them on the device. Camera, there's tons of camera stuff. You can get access to the frames coming directly off the camera. If you want to do any image analysis, you can actually get the YUV, the YUV frames directly, or you can get ARGB frames. And you can build your own little camera application that captures those. That stuff. Actually, was there any questions about push? Sorry, no. Camera, so in the slide deck, there's a bunch of code. There's also code on MSDN. Tons of camera stuff.
Media library?
No, that's on purpose. You can get images through, there's like choosers, which the user can select which image they want to give to you, but you can't delete them.
Is there a way to save an image not to the media library?
Yeah, I mean, you can save it to your own application's isolated storage.
Okay.
Yeah.
Say if I wanted to develop a 2-player game as an app, would there be a pull and a push notification?
There'd be 2 pushes, right? So like take like Scrabble, for instance, right? If we're playing Scrabble against each other, right? My turn's done. I'll send you a push notification saying it's your turn. And in fact, you don't have to have a web service in the middle. You can actually have a push come directly from one device to the other, right? You just use that URI, and there, on MSDN, there's docs of like what the message looks like, and you can push directly between 2 devices. Quickly, sensors, accelerometer on the device, again, works very similar to the geocoordinate watcher, same pattern. And in fact, in Mango, there's a nice thing called the Motion API, which sort of pulls information from the accelerometer and the gyroscope and brings them all together to sort of get really good the absolute orientation and position of your device. And you can get, if you like, using like all the matrix, the quadrion, and all those great. If you like math, you can do all sorts of cool stuff with that. And you can actually combine it with things like the camera to do sort of augmented reality applications as well. And then just quickly to wrap up, and I'll get out of here. I think I talked about most of these things. Yeah, camera, GPS, accelerometer, gyro. There's native sockets access if you want to do just network sockets, like BSD style sockets, WinSock. But the .NET versions. SQL CE is on the phone. There's access to the phone contacts if you want as well as calendar, maps I showed. So you can do launchers and choosers I didn't talk about, but if you want to get things like photos or add things like contacts to the database, you use launchers or choosers, which are system UI that comes up, and the user can put data in there. Controls, great. Talked about that a little bit. Tiles I talked about. I didn't talk about multiple tiles. So applications can have multiple tiles, and you can actually have those programmatically pinned. So you can have, like again, if you had your Scrabble instance, right? You have the Scrabble one on the tile, then if I'm playing 3 or 4 different games, I could potentially have a tile for each of those. And you can integrate a little bit into the Search Hub and Music Hub and Photos Hub. Here's a couple links. Quick starts, a whole bunch of code you guys can use to see how these features work. Again, for some design stuff, the Noun project is kind of neat. It's got a bunch of icons on it that look kind of Metro. I always find I'm looking for icons. The toolkit available on silverlight.coplex.com. There's a bunch of design resources, Microsoft Design Toolbox, and if you want to do things like build that push service really easily, there's the Azure toolkit you can use as well, and that's on Codeplex. Any questions? Yep.
The push notification, right? It's for, let's say I have an app and like 10 players are downloading it.
Yep.
And I have a server and I'm sending out, it would be 10 different IDs sort of thing?
Yeah, so each instance will have a different URI for it. Okay. So if you have 1,000 people with your app that you got to send push notifications to, you have 1,000 URIs. Yeah.
Okay. All right.
So is there any way to do audio analysis? Say like you have a conversation and you want to analyze the audio wave.
Well, so you can't actually plug in. You cannot actually plug into the phone service, right? So if you want to record someone's phone call, you can't actually do that. But within your application, there are APIs to record audio, and those are actually they're under XNA. So I didn't talk at all about XNA. XNA is the game framework. But there are APIs in XNA where you can get raw microphone input, so you can get like a PCM buffer from the microphone, and you can do your analysis on that. Yep.
Yeah, the Silverlight toolkit, right?
Yep.
When you're using an app, do we need to reference something?
Yeah, so just like I did with maps, you go and find the DLL, and you reference it that way. Yep.
Right.
Can push notifications be pushed to different pin to start shell tiles?
They can be sent to different pin to start shell tiles. Yes. So like the secondary tiles, yes. Okay. Yeah. There's like a tile ID thing. I don't know if you saw it there.
Yeah, I think it's like shell tile that find.
Right, and so so in here there's like a tile ID, and so that'll be you can find them and you get an ID back. Yep. Cool, thanks.
All right. So we're going to get started. This is actually this is a great group to have for performance. Like we could do like a whole group therapy session with this amount of people. So my name is Oren Nachman. I'm an SDET on the developer platform performance team. So we do all the performance for the developer platform, and by extension the system as well. Because if we find something that's slowing the system that no one else cares about, we're the ones who go in to work out what's going on and drive to a fix. I talk pretty fast. So slow me down if I skip things or if something doesn't make sense. Anybody that wasn't in the last session or anyone that hasn't touched any Silverlight code at all, like any XAML code or hasn't really done much, I might be talking like over here. So just raise your hand or yell out. It's a small enough group that we can just do it casually. At the end of the day, at 8 o'clock, it was supposed to be 8 o'clock. At 8:21 p.m. at night, You guys are sitting here for one reason only, and that's performance. That's the only thing I'm going to talk about. If that doesn't interest you, the door's right there. If it does interest you, what we're going to talk about is not performance of code. I'm not interested in performance of code. I really don't care. Like if you write the slowest bubble sort that you can think of, you don't, like, that's not what I'm going to talk about. That's not my point. My point, at the end of the day, I don't care how fast your code executes. I care about one thing and one thing only. I care about you writing an app for the phone that is performant, not fast. And we'll talk about the difference in a sec. I also run around a lot, so just like ignore it. So, couple of things. This is the agenda. This is what we're going to run through. So we're going to talk about what is performance. Like, what am I actually going to be talking about? I really, like, complexity, for example, the different measures that we learn about in university are extremely useful, and I was actually kind of shocked, but you do kind of use them every now and then in your day-to-day job, but that's not what you're going to do when you write a little Windows Phone app. We're going to talk about a little bit about basics, so a bit about how the framework works on the phone, what it does, what it looks like kind of behind the scenes, so what's happening on your behalf. We're going to talk about some real-world app pain points. We're probably not going to run through the slides. You can check out the slides later on. We'll talk about most of those points just through like a debugging session and a debugging coding session on an example, and then we're going to run through the regular just QA if we have time. Feel free to stick around afterwards as well to ask questions. Or to send me an email. That was right at the beginning there. So there's my email. Feel free to ping me. So when I talk about performance, especially in the beginning, especially if you're just starting out in the project, this is kind of the initial reaction. Sure, performance, yeah, that's right at the end. That's once I'm feature complete, yeah, then I can go in and I can tweak, right? Because there's no point like thinking about how fast things run or how well it runs when it doesn't work, right? Kind of. So what is mobile performance? So, I mean, anyone? Mobile performance, what is it? So I've already said it's not code, right? I really don't, I mean, sure, there is an aspect to how fast you write your code, but again, I trust that everyone sitting here today has enough technical like acumen to be able to write good code. Maybe not super speed, fast code that requires, 10 years of postdoc research, but good code. So what is it? Come on. I know you're eating. That's why I'm picking on you. What's performance on a mobile device? You're the only one with food. Sorry. Oh, so are you, but that's... So come on. What's mobile performance? Come on. Seriously, dude. Like I have my phone. What is performance? How do I judge performance on a phone? Smooth. Thank you. Anybody catch the Android thing 2 days ago? Android I/O. What was their new project called?
Which one? GlassQ.
No. That's all like consumer rubbish. Sorry, the developer one, the one they were all like excited about. Butter? Thank you, Project Butter. Butter is smooth. Buttery smooth. Sorry, that was actually our official line for TechEd like 3 years ago about Windows Phone. But anyway, we'll get there. Anything else? Okay, so we have like smooth, like smoothness in general. Okay, anything else? What does smoothness mean? All right, come on, work with me. There's such a small group. Come on. Response time for what?
Display?
Well, the display draws even if you don't draw. The display doesn't care about you. The display runs, it draws. But okay, but expand on that. What does that mean, display?
Change.
So okay, how quickly things change. All right, yes.
Response to user input.
Perfect. Great. Response to user input. If I put my finger down, I want to see what? A reaction as quickly as possible. The user has to know. It's funny. People always say, like, what's the hardest thing about typing on a screen?
There's no feedback.
There's no tactile feedback. But that's not completely correct. You start feeling through your fingers just by virtue of seeing. By virtue of you seeing, or even feeling, if, like in the case of like little vibrations, depending on the device, but by virtue of you seeing that button highlight when you tap on it, it's translated in your subconsciousness, very similar to the same effect as if I felt myself touching on it. It doesn't work for a keyboard, obviously, because you have heaps of tactile feedback, like of this visual feedback, and you don't know what you've tapped on. But if you're going to tap on a big button, and you don't see that visual feedback straight away, you're not performant. It doesn't matter how quickly the action performs underneath the covers. All right, anything else? Some other ideas? It's the problem with using your own phone. You get like SMSs during the...
Power consumption?
Power consumption, that's a great one. So we're not going to talk about power consumption today, because as a developer you care about it less, but it's a very important one. You care about it less for one reason and one reason only. Because if your app uses a lot of power and the user is using it, and you're using that power because you need to, so for example, you're playing a game, then the consumer, the guy who's using it, your user, he knows that he's going to suck up his battery. So we had a whole conversation about this a couple of years ago when we were designing, like when XNA performance was coming together, and the question was, well, we're sucking a lot of memory, we're sucking up a lot of battery while playing a game. So we could do all these tricks to try and kind of optimize, and we did as many as we could on our side. And the question is, well, should the developer care? Should we give them all these fancy tools to measure how many watts are they pulling? And at the end of the day, we have a bit of tools for that, but it's not a major focus, because if you're going to be playing some immersive 3D game, or on the flip side, if you're going to be playing Netflix on your bus ride home, you know it's going to suck up your battery. We do a bunch of stuff in the background to make sure that it sucks up as little as possible, but as a developer on your level, you shouldn't have to worry about that too much. But it's a good point. That definitely is performance on the phone. Anything else? Anyone? I guess that's the downside of a small group, right? Performance is a magician's trick. That's all it is. It's a sleight of hand. It's the speed at which the person does not realize what you're doing has been done. It's not, at the end of the day, it's not about how quickly your cycles run on the CPU. I have a demo that I do at conferences sometimes where I have two apps that are identical startup. One of them starts up with a blank screen until it's ready, and then it shows all the UI. And the other one is exactly the same startup, but it starts up half a second slower. So half a second slower, but it has a progress bar while loading. Can you guess which one people think starts up quicker? Obviously, side by side, they'll see which one is quicker, right? That's why I don't do it like in front of the camera, because it's kind of annoying. But when they're just like, load the app, okay, now load the second app, which one started faster? Can you guess like how many, like which one? The progress bar one. Why? Because it feels faster. There's this whole feature in Visual Studio in Dev 11, right? In Visual Studio 2012, that actually they've proven is 250 milliseconds slower. But because it's user cancelable and the UI does not lock up while it's happening like it did in 2010, everyone thinks it's so super and fast. But when the perf guys look at it, they're like, oh my God, it's 250 milliseconds slower. But no one cares. So here's a couple of things that I kind of like, the big four that I call out, things that you guys have to worry about. So we spoke about touch response. How quickly does the screen react from the user's perspective? How quickly does the user see that something's happened based on the fact that you touch the screen? Visual cues in general. So that's the progress bar while we're loading. So just not showing like a black screen. Smoothness. If I'm animating, if I'm moving something around the screen, if I'm pinching or panning or whatever that is, I don't know what that is, zooming. And patience. At the end of the day, although it's the fourth one on the list, the code does make a bit of a difference. The user does not want to wait 20 seconds for something to happen, even if you do have a progress bar. So it's a juggling act. You need to juggle all four of these so that you get a good combination, a good mix of fast code that responds and reacts beautifully and perfectly and is buttery smooth. So the golden rule at the end of the day is platform performance. This is what I measure, and I measure it in milliseconds. Sometimes when we do really fun stuff, it's even less than that. But you guys do not have to worry about that. If something took 10 milliseconds instead of 20 instead of 10, okay, sure. Unless you're writing like something high performance, or you're writing like a really high performance game where you really need that extra frame. If it's happening every frame, sure, then every 60 frames, we run at 60 frames a second, all the way back to Windows Phone 7. So if every frame is 16 milliseconds and you're taking 20 milliseconds, you're going to start skipping frames. But then you look at it and you say, well, my game runs beautifully at 50 frames a second, or whatever, 20 milliseconds. I think it's close to 50. So that might be fine. Depends on what the user experience looks like. For you, at the end of the day, what you need to worry about is the perception. What does user feel when he touches your app? And we'll see that in like a little bit later when we run through an app that, like a little demo app that I've written up. So what we're going to do is we're going to look very quickly at a couple of just general concepts of what the framework looks like. We're going to look at a very quick demo. This was written by Roger Peters. This is actually a game that's actually in the marketplace. There's an XNA version. This is a very early Silverlight version, but it highlights some really cool performance issues, which I find really nice to demo on. And if I can find it. They have a new system. It takes a little longer. It was upgraded and now it's slower. That's why we talk about performance. All right, so this is kind of a little hard to see. Can you see the green lines running across the screen? If not, you're sitting too far away. Come closer. There are two progress bars. One on the top is the standard stock progress bar that comes with Windows Phone, comes in Mango. The other one is the same one, but with a better template applied to it. Let's see if we can see if there's any kind of difference. So we have this concept called a UI thread. If you haven't done a lot of UI, you might not have run into it, but it's basically the thread that drives everything that the user sees, the user interface. So I'm going to block the user interface thread. Anyone notice anything? Please tell me you noticed something. Yeah. All right, good. All right. So the one on top blocks. It's stopped. It's not moving. The one on the bottom, buttery smooth. So whenever I show this demo and I explain what's going on in a second, people are like, but no one ever blocks the UI thread, especially not for that long. I think that's like 1 second or 2 seconds. No one ever does that. No one's that silly, right? No one would be that stupid. OK, so let's take the XML file that is exactly the same size as the one that Facebook downloads. It's not the Facebook one. Don't worry. I haven't ripped them off or anything. But this is the size of what the Facebook app on your phone downloads and parses at startup. I'm just going to wait for them to be in a good position so you can all see. All right. So what's going on here is the UI thread is not completely blocked, but can you see the jitter? Can you see the smoothness? Is that smooth as butter? That's like the keyword today. I'm sorry. It's stuck in my mind. In TechEd, I refused to say it. I was like, that sounds so corny. But no. So you can see the top one is jittering like crazy. And the bottom one is just fine. Does anybody know what's going on? OK, you were here last time. You cheat. Anyone? So Silverlight has this concept of two threads. They're system threads. They're not your threads. You can't touch them. You can interact with them. You can't stop them. You can't start them. Nothing like that. One is called the UI thread and one is called the compositor thread. The UI thread is what generates the user interface. It's what creates the pixels when you say, I want a border around a button. Right? A button has a border inside it. That's what gives you the white line. And it does a few other things. It interacts with the system in some ways. That is the main thread that all your code runs on by default as well. So if you have a general callback, right, main page loading, and you do some code in there, it's going to run on the UI thread. Now, we also have another magical thread called the compositor thread. And the compositor thread is another thread that runs in parallel to the UI thread, and it ticks independently of the UI thread. Every 16.6 milliseconds, so 60 frames a second, it gets a ping from the, essentially it gets a ping from the video driver and says, bang, I'm ready, VSync, I'm ready to draw another frame. And the compositor thread, that's awesome. Because I know that I'm animating this progress bar, so I'm going to draw it even though the UI thread is blocked. Now the one on the top is a bad animation. It's tied into the UI thread. It has this little thing that checks every single loop, every time it updates. On the UI thread, it checks what orientation am I in. It's a bug, and it will be fixed. But that's a bug. So this shows you what happens when you're tied to the UI thread. That's what happens when you get tied to the compositor thread. 99.9% of the time, if you're doing an animation, you want to make sure you stay on the compositor thread. Why? Because if you do something like parsing a very large XML file, you're going to get the nice smooth animation as opposed to the choppy one. Questions? Nice. Either I'm really not explaining this well and no one understands what's going on, or I've like finally hit the sweet spot. All right. Oh, I tapped on something. Come on. So Silverlight has this thing called counters. And these counters, and it's kind of helpers actually. Well, let's talk about it. Let's call them helpers. It has this concept of helpers. And these are visual debugging aids that we give you as part of the platform. And we say, use these to help find your initial performance problems. So we're going to run through them. We're going to see the different types now. So the very first one is the one that I already mentioned, is called counters. So in general, this is just a very simple game, right? You're this poor dude. He doesn't have any food. Someone, I don't know who, someone's throwing, I think in the original game there's a monkey. So someone's throwing fruit and you've got to catch it. There's a really awesome bug. Can you see if you can catch it? I'm pretty sure that's my fault somewhere with playing with the code, but that's not the important part. So what we have is these things called counters. Now you'll notice that they're along the side. If you've done Silverlight development on the desktop, you'll notice that they're on the top. They can't be on the top here. Does anyone know why they can't be on the top for a Silverlight app on the phone? Anyone? Anyone? What do we have on the top of an app, usually? Sometimes. Not always. Nope. Notifications do pop up, but they go away very quickly. What can an app have that they can get rid of? No, not a menu. There you go. The notification area at the top that has the time and the battery, etc. So that would draw underneath that normally. So we have them on the side. And what you're looking at here are the different counters that give you the very basic health of your app. And I can tell that there's something not healthy already because something's red. And we'll get to it. So we highlight red things when something is problematic. So what are the numbers? Remember I spoke about? I don't know. Remember I said that there were 2 threads? That's the compositor thread frame rate. So it's currently running at about 40 frames a second. 40, 41, 38, 39. That red one here, what is that? UI thread. Next one here is video memory. Unless you see like all 9s, probably not an issue. These are the number of surfaces that you've created. So we'll talk about surfaces in a minute, but in general, every surface is everything you see on the screen. So each banana is a surface, each wave is a surface, the little dude in the boat is a surface, the trees are surfaces. They're surfaces. So we have 10 surfaces, and you can see that it's changing. And you can see it changes as the fruits come in and out. So there's obviously a surface or something being created there. This one here, this 002, are implicit surfaces. So these are surfaces that Silverlight had said, oh, I think you need an extra surface here, so I'm going to create it on your behalf. Again, if you don't see these numbers going nuts, like really, really high, not an issue. Very rare. This one, though, is the most interesting one, apart from the first 2. So I guess it's the third interesting one. That is what we call the fill rate counter. Now, the fill rate counter counts the number of pixels on the screen that you're pushing to the GPU every single frame. So it is a count of how many screens worth of pixels are you pushing every single frame. So the number there is 3. So that means every single time the GPU is ready, the GPU is ready to get another screen, I'm pushing 3 screens worth of pixels. Now you'll notice that there doesn't seem to be, like, sure, I can see that there's a little overlap. Right? So I can see that, like, sure, there's the background probably goes all the way to the end. There's some waves. There's, this little dude. There's the trees. But that doesn't look like 3 screens worth. Now we have a problem. The GPU on this phone is extremely powerful relative to its size. But it's not that powerful. And it starts breaking down at around 2.5, 2.75 fill rate. So if you're sending 3 times 800 times 480, because that's the resolution of the screen, pixels every single frame, the GPU starts slowing down. The GPU says, hey, you've given me heaps of screens, no worries. I'm going to process them, I'm going to display them. But I'm not going to give you your vsync every 16.6 seconds. I'm not going to ping you back and say, whoo, I'm ready, go. Because it can't. It just can't do it that fast. So it does it. It doesn't reject any of the pixels, but it's going to slow you down. And that's part of the reason why the composite thread is kind of slow here. So let's see if we can figure out where things are going, what's happening here. So the first one to see is let's see if we can find out the size of our textures. So the size of the textures that I'm sending to the GPU every time, and let's see if we can see any issues there. So what we have here is redraw regions. Redraw regions is a really cool flag that basically every single time you redraw something on the screen, it'll tint it. As you can see, the different tinting. Now, if you redraw something that's already tinted, it'll change the tinting color. Can you see that? Can anyone see the bug? There are 2 bugs here.
He is on one big screen.
First of all, he's on one massive screen, and you can't really see it, but in the top left corner, there's a little button. It's like a menu button. And he's been lopped in with the menu button. So that's one bug, is that there's this massive texture. So if I go to here, that's one whole screen worth of pixels. Does anybody see any issue with that? One whole screen full of pixels? Okay. Pardon?
A lot of pixels.
A lot of pixels. There you go. So here's another problem. Anyone notice that the tinting is changing? Or that when I touch on the guy and I kind of move on him, the tinting kind of changes?
Wouldn't that imply that there's multiple layers there too?
It's one layer, same layer. What did I say? So when it changes the tinting, what happens? It's redrawing. But why would I redraw that? Here, let's look at a better example. Check out the fruit. Is the fruit tinting?
No.
It's tinted because it's drawn, but it's not retinting because it's not redrawing. So let's think back to like graphics 101. If I have a texture and I give it to the GPU, I can say, draw that texture. And then I can also say move that texture. Right? I mean, I wish it was that easy, but that's essentially what you're doing. Translate it, move it around. So the GPU doesn't need to actually go through. We don't need to go on our side and say, oh, I've got this fruit. I've now moved it like that. So let me redraw the pixels on my side and then give those pixels to the GPU to render onto the screen. No, I can just tell the GPU, no, just do that. And the GPU will redraw it for me, and I'm off I go. So what's happening here is that this surface is not cached. And we'll see a bit of caching in a minute. But at the end of the day, if you know that you're going to animate a surface, there is a flag called bitmap cache. You go to the surface, say bitmap cache equals, cache mode equals bitmap cache. That's it. Magic. Remember that. You won't remember it, so come back to the recording to remember it when you see that things are redrawing. Silverlight's smart enough to auto-cache most things. So you see how the fruit are not cached, are not redrawing? It's because they're cached automatically. Because we say, oh, you've put an animation on that fruit, I'm going to cache that because you're not going to change that. But on this, because the movement is happening on the UI thread, it's happening in user code, so there's code that says, hey, my finger moved, move the guy to match the finger. There's no animation on it. Silverlight doesn't know what you're going to do with it, so it redraws it every single time. So we were talking about how many actual textures do we have. So this one's called cache visualization. So this one tints exactly the same things. It tints every texture, but it tints them blue. And the more blue your screen is, the more stacked textures you have. So you can see how blue it is over here. I don't know if you guys can tell. Maybe I'll zoom in a little. So you can see the differences in the blueness. Is that actually like highlighting my finger? Oh, God. I have dirty fingers. Smudge marks are not included in the counter. So you see how this is way bluer than that? That's because every single wave, for some reason, is an image that goes from the bottom of the screen to the top. Now the developer doesn't think about that, right? What does he care? It's an image, it's a ping, it's transparent, it's fine. I'm going to put it on. But no, every one of these pixels is more pixels that I'm pushing towards the final GPU picture that you see rendered on the screen. And then finally, and we have a download link to this later, we have a little tool which is even more useful specifically for fill rate. And this little tool will go in and it'll read through your visual tree. So the visual tree is the tree that represents all the UI elements on the screen. And it will grab a screenshot of each one of them and it will tell you the size in pixels of each one. So let's see it in action. Performance, come on. So if this was a real app, there'd be a progress bar, you know, it'd be really nice and smooth. Hey, it didn't work. That's cool. The problem with having small buttons. There we go. Sorry, small buttons, big fingers, not good. So what I have here is the visual tree. By the way, last time there were all these like glitches and things in the demo. So I was going to say, okay, this time I'm going to try it without glitches, but it's a Microsoft presentation, so I know that's not possible. So I didn't even say it. So here's the visual tree, and it's laid out like a tree. So you can kind of see like what's a child of what, right? So this rectangle is a child of the layout root, which is a child of backdrop control, etc., etc., etc. And next to each one is a little number, and the number is the count of pixels. Does anybody know off the top of their head very quickly what 384,000 pixels corresponds to? Come on, interns. You guys are in university. You guys know what's going on.
Or 640 by 480?
Close. 480 by 800. So 384,000 pixels is one whole screen. So there's something here that is drawing a full screen. Okay, well, let's see what it is. Okay. Can you guys see that? No. Let's zoom out a bit so you can see what's going on. Out. Okay. So it's that. And that's the background. Can we do anything about that? No. We need the background. It's the whole screen. Perfect. Okay. So that's not an issue. Let's keep going down the list and see what else we find. Oh, so here's another 384,000. And this one's already kind of weird to me. It's called the palm trees image. This actually stood out straight away. It's the two palm trees. That takes up the whole screen. Anybody know why that takes up the whole screen, by the way?
All the spacing.
Pardon?
All the spacing between them?
Sure, but the spacing has no color. It's transparent. It's pink. Why does it take up pixels?
To a black background. So
Nope, there's no black background, because we saw it before, right? The background blends through. It's definitely transparent pink. Definitely, 100% verified, confirmed.
But it's like its own,
I don't know a lot, but that definitely.
like its own layer?
No, because we don't care about those, like, that doesn't matter.
There's a set number of pixels between the two palm trees.
Sure, there are that many, 800 by 480, right?
That's part of the PNG you're probably using for the image, though.
Sure, but the image is 800. No, the image is 800 by 480. It's size to the screen, has transparent pixels in the middle and color. All right, last one.
Is it alternating with the first image?
Nope. It's just one image displayed once. Sure, one more. Why not?
It has to process the pixels anyways, because even though they're transparent.
Perfect. Right on the money. The fact that a pixel is transparent doesn't mean it's not there. It has a color. You know what the color is? Transparent. So we don't go through and say, oh, that's transparent, that's not a pixel, so we can't draw it. Or like, that doesn't exist. We create a texture that has all these transparent pixels. We give it to the GPU and we tell the GPU, hey, here's green, 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 green. Oh, here's a negative pixel. It's transparent. Draw whatever's behind it. Just don't draw it. Okay. So the GPU says, fine, I won't draw it. Goes to the next one. What's that? Oh, it's transparent. Goes to the next one. It's still a pixel. Still needs to be processed. And that is something, you don't know how many people make these mistakes, and not just in games. Like, we're talking about apps that have like pretty graphics and things like that, and they just don't realize that it's actually sometimes better to split an image up into 3 images and have them overlaid than rather than have one big image with all this transparency in between, because it'll kill your fill rate off. And we can run through other things, like, I mean, we saw, this is what I'm talking about, the water. So you can see that the water itself takes up a lot more than it should, et cetera, and you can run through. There's the boat drag area, well, that's empty, but it's still taking up a lot of pixels, and that one's quite sized, etc. So that's a little tool that you can download just to help. If you do see that fill rate counter go red, it goes red above 2.5. I'm not sure if we change that to 3 in the end. All right, switch back to here. Take away one thing from here, it's the fact that performance is really important. Take away 2 things from here, well, there are other things. Take away 10 things from here, number 10, don't use the emulator for performance testing. Well, number 3 maybe. Very, very quick demo. All right. So this is the perf pressure demo that I just showed you. And we have our good friends, I wonder if I can enlarge that. We have our good friends, the progress bars. Now let's see what happens this time when I block the UI thread on the emulator. Whoopsie daisies. Yeah. So even if I do the realistic one, they both kind of suck. The bottom one is still a little better, but not by much. So that's just a really quick, really little, it's a little, yeah, it's been lost, I know. It's just a little demo of like why you should not use the emulator for performance testing. Use the emulator for your functional stuff. Get your app up and running. Always test on device, always. The emulator works both ways. The UI thread itself runs faster on the emulator. So by itself, it has problems with multi-threads and stuff like that, but the emulator itself runs faster on the UI thread. So you might see things are really awesome on the emulator and you're like, I've got no problems, I'm awesome. And then you come to device, or you publish it to the, to AppHub, you publish it on the marketplace, and the first review that comes in, this app sucks. And you're like, I wonder why that is. And the second review comes in, this app's really slow. Or the third one comes in and it's like, this app crashes on startup because you hit the 10-second and you're killed. Did you guys know that? Did you mention that previously? 10-second startup, you're killed. Like if your startup is too slow, you're dead. System watchdog comes in, eats you up, you're dead. You don't even have any chance to, there's no recovery, there's nothing you can do. So if your startup takes longer than 10 seconds, you better refactor it so that your startup starts up and then does whatever actions it needs, like on a background thread. Yes?
How does it measure that serve time? Like, how do you tell the system you're done?
You don't have to worry about that. As soon as your UI starts displaying, you're fine. We do it in the background. So if your UI starts up, so your page starts up, it parses. Basically, the thing here is don't do heavy work on loaded, don't do heavy work on navigation complete, all that sort of stuff. All those events that make sense to not do a lot of work in, don't do. You can kick work off. You can schedule work. You can use like a dispatcher timer to say, okay, once I'm started up on the next UI thread tick, do whatever work you want. You can start a background thread. Start a background thread, go after the website. What you do not want to do is, for example, start hitting like 20 websites, even though the responses come back on a background thread, still just kicking those off on the UI thread is still a little bit of work. And especially if things are slow, etc. I had a guy who had a mutex, so he was waiting for startup for when he would get his response back. Right? Because responses always come back, web request responses always come back on a background thread. There's nothing you can do about it. That's the way it works. Same in Windows. The whole point of like the asynchronicity of your code. So I had a guy who had a mutex that said, okay, well, I'm going to block startup until I get this response from a website because I want to know whatever. I need this data. So it worked fine for him on his emulator, it worked fine for him on his like home Wi-Fi, and then he didn't get through certification because they test without internet and the app keeps crashing. So the idea there is you wait, you show a message to the user saying, hey, I can't do it. Very quickly, now this comes under the basics, but it's usually the part that no one understands. So don't stress about it too much. Feel free to ask questions if you're not getting what I'm talking about. It's more, again, the conceptual. So this is actually bringing out like the conceptual diagrams that match what I was just showing you with the compositor thread and the UI thread flying around. So on the desktop, what usually happens in a lot of frameworks is we have a UI thread and we have user threads. Right? The UI thread is always active, it's always there. And we have user threads that you bring up, new thread, and they're active, they die, you bring up another one, they die, etc. You do a web request, another one comes in. On the phone, and we're very strict about this, is we have this extra thread. And by the way, this is now the same model as Metro. So if you're writing like a Windows 8 Metro app, it's exactly the same thing. There's a composer thread, a UI thread. So for a few other interesting threads as well, even on our side, but those are the two main ones. And again, the composer thread runs for the life of your app. Composer thread can run as fast as it wants. It's not tied to the UI thread. The UI thread is tied to the composer thread. If you somehow manage to bog down the composer thread, you give it a fill rate of 20, you push 20 times 800 times 480 pixels into the GPU, every single frame, you're going to slow down the composer thread, and the UI thread is going to say, ooh, the GPU is so far behind me that I'm running faster than it, and it's going to slow itself down to match so that things don't get out of sync. So let's see how they interact with each other. Let's say you go in XAML and you create your nice little shape. It's a circle, and it happens to be yellow. It's that kind of day. And you say, hey, I've got this awesome circle. Let's animate it across the screen. Why? Because it's cool. I'm going to animate my circle, right? So I start my animation. I have no idea why one is yellow and one is orange. Just imagine that they're both yellow or both orange, whatever mood you're in. And the animation starts at the bottom of the screen and it runs bang, 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 and it gets to the end, right? It's a storyboard animation. I'm sure, did you guys see that in the previous talk? Did you speak about storyboards? Okay, so Silverlight, this is more, I guess, because he was probably talking about more of a platform. So Silverlight as a development model, one of the things that it has is these really nice XAML-defined storyboards. And you can say, I want to do these actions. I want to, like the progress bar that you saw before that was extended, it was scaled. All I said was render transform, when every time you render it so that on the y-axis it's scaled times 10. I didn't do on the x because then the animation flies off the screen and it's really funky. But you can do the same thing here. So you just do a translate transform and you say, okay, I'm going to move my ball around. Okay, the ball moves. Now that animation is something that the GPU can do by itself, right? There's nothing in that animation that a GPU can't do on its own. So we pass to the composer thread and we say, hey, run by yourself. I don't care what's going on. Just do it. Perfect. We get to the end of the animation, nothing happens. Now the user comes along and he says, okay, well the ball was interesting, but now I want a colorful ball. I want it to move from the bottom of the screen to the top of the screen, but I want it to change colors as it goes. Okay, perfect. So we kick off the UI thread and we say, all right, well we're going to start off with orange because that's our default anyway. And then I'm going to run another thing on the UI thread and it's going to move a little bit. I'm going to change it to blue. But now as I'm doing that, the user hits another button. And this button is, go out to my awesome web service, do something really cool, parse a really big XML file and come back. Okay. Well, the UI thread's busy, right? It missed that tick. It missed the movement. So it didn't change the color. But what did happen to the animation? It kept moving. Why? Because it's on the composer thread. Composer thread doesn't care. Composer thread lives in its own little world. It has a ball. It's been told, take this ball and move it from here to here. What you do with it along the way is your problem, UI thread. If you missed a tick, that's your problem. It's your fault. I'm still going to be buttery smooth. And that's what's happening. Now the UI thread is finished. It's finished its work. I don't know what's happened to the colors here. Okay, you can kind of see that it's changed colors. It's finished its work and it's changed the colors. It's gone back to changing colors because the UI thread picked up where it left off. You can imagine that's, I don't know, red, green, any other primary color, whatever you want. And that's the way they interact. So basically, composite thread animation is good, UI thread animation is bad. We'll talk about what gets you kicked off in a second. This slide you can look at. This is really interesting for people who really want to know like how things are working. This is like each tick, what happens in the UI thread and what happens in the composite thread. And you can see, I mean, sure, I'm oversimplifying here, but just the fact that in the composite thread there's only 2 boxes, it just shows you how tight that architecture is. The composite architecture literally is, hey, I'm going to animate something, and then I'm going to draw it. And then I'm going to animate, and I'm going to draw it. And I don't care what else is happening in the system. So what gets kicked off the compositor thread? Anything that modifies the base texture of an object. So the color, for example. We were changing the color, so it didn't animate on the compositor thread. Right? That makes sense. We were changing it on the UI thread, so that bit of the animation happened on the UI thread. And that's why it didn't happen when the UI thread was busy. That's why we missed a bit. Opacity mask. Opacity mask is that really cool thing that lets you create those kind of gradients, but gradients in like circles and weird shapes. So that can't happen because that doesn't work on the GPU. The GPU is not very good at handling kind of gradients. It's really good at handling a texture full of pixels, a texture full of pixels, or something solid. Non-rectangular clips. So if you have something that's not square, we have to do a lot more work. The GPU loves triangles, and by extension rectangles. So if you have something that's a triangle, well, we're not smart enough to figure it out because it has to be we're smart enough to figure it out. We're not stupid enough to spend time figuring out if this is an exact triangle that can go to the GPU because it has to be pretty exact to fit in what's called the triangle strip. And non-storyboard animations. So if you have a thing using what's called composition target rendering, if you haven't used it, you don't have to wonder about it. It's a callback that's called every single frame. So as the frames tick along the screen, even when you're not seeing anything, the screen is drawing, every single frame, it's going to call you back. Every 16 milliseconds. If you're fast enough, it'll call you every 16 milliseconds. If not, you're going to miss some, obviously. So if you animate there, so if you take an animation, you say, okay, I'm here, move my X a little bit, move my X a little bit more, move my X. Obviously, the compositor thread can't animate that. Does anybody know why? Because we don't have ESP. We don't know what you're going to do next. And I can't run your code on the compositor. With a storyboard animation, you tell me, I want you to move a ball from here to here. And you can do that from code behind as well. And then the compositor thread knows exactly what's going to happen next. But if you have some funky code that says, hey, if the time index finishes with a 2, then move the ball down. But if it's like a, if it's the 7th prime number, then move it, backwards. Well, the compositor thread has no idea what you're doing. So you run that on the UI thread. Actually, one point about that. The phone, even though the screen is on, and you can see my screen is still on, everything's shut down. The UI thread is not ticking, the composite thread is not ticking, nothing's ticking. But if you do composition target rendering, you're telling us, we want you to keep ticking even though you're not drawing anything. And that's a battery feature, by the way. Like as soon as, and we have these things called health violations, as soon as the device is idle, even if it's running an app, everything needs to shut down. And then as soon as reacts to some sort of input, a web request coming back, a user touch, something like that, then we wake up. These are your best friends. These are the different counters that I showed before. Go grab it afterwards. How much time do I have, approximately? We started at 8:28?
Yeah.
Okay, just checking.
We're running late,
so feel free to leave. I get a taxi home tonight, so it's fine. All right, so what we're going to do now is we're going to look at a little app. I'm a fan of Reddit. So we're going to look at a little app that I wrote. You can grab the source code from Codeplex. Come on. And it's a Reddit app. It is very simple. It's very basic so that it's really great to demo. It's really great to learn from if you want to dissect the code later on. All it does is load Reddit, pings the Reddit website. Reddit website has a really cool feature, which a few websites have now adopted, where you can just add .json at the end, and it will give you it'll give you the JSON feed instead of the HTML page. And then I parse out the JSON using JSON.NET. You can use any of the standard libraries. And then I get through, a listing of the front page. And I have like a little list of subreddits. And I have some pictures that come from pics. Not safe for work is filtered. Okay, so the app looks good, right? It looks kind of nice. It's performant. It's all right. It's not too bad. No, there's nothing in about. The list is, I mean, it's decent. It's there. Now let's see what startup really looks like for this app. Hey, I have email. So the app starts up, I get a splash screen. Now it goes to what's hot. I'm not interested in what's hot. I want to see the pictures. No, I want to see the pictures, really. Oh, there we go. Did you guys see that? I'm a fan of pictures. I look at the pictures. That's all I look at, right? So when I start up my app doesn't have an option to go to pictures, so I want to see the pictures. I want to see it right now. But it doesn't work. Now, sure, I might be over dramatizing, but at the end of the day, that's what happens to a lot of users. A user gets to learn your app. He knows that when he starts up your app, sorry to pick on you, Daniel, when he starts up your app and he wants to get the train schedule for Chicago right now for this little bus stop, no, it's a train stop, right? It's a train schedule. He wants to get the train schedule right now. He knows exactly, he remembers exactly what he needs to press to get the current timetable. So when your app starts up, he doesn't care that you're loading things in the background. What he cares about is how quickly can I get to what I want now? So I remember that in my app, I have pics and I want to get to there now. Or I have my main list. See it one more time. I have my main list and I want to get to number 10. Why? Because I don't like what's on the top. I want to get, ooh, where's the list gone? Oh, there it is. None of these leave great impressions. And that's where it comes down to perception. I have an app on the marketplace. Most of the apps that I wrote were apps that I wanted. It's something that I wanted. If you find a use for it, great, it's there. Go for it, grab it. You want to pay me some money? Sure, I'll take your money. But most of them have free apps, right? You just grab them. One of the apps I wrote was really, it solved a problem for me. It's a Roku app. It's a remote control. And I can't design for crap, so it really looks really bad. But there was one remote control there that existed already, but it was really slow. And it bothered me, not because I'm a performance guy, so I'm constantly nitpicking these things, but because it was really slow. It would start up really slowly, it would crash every now and then, and they have a really easy API, so I knocked together an app, and I published it because someone else might find it useful. If you look at the comments for my app, now they've upgraded the other one, so a bit of competition always helps, but if you look at the comments, some of the comments are so much faster than the other one. And that's what you want, right? You don't want, the very first talk I gave in PDC, the introduction was, you guys have a great idea, you publish it to the marketplace, at the same time someone on the other side of the world also had exactly the same idea, and you publish the same app. Both as functional. But one of them is really smooth and nice, and usable and beautiful, and it just responds, and the other one, yours, it blanks, it jitters, it doesn't load fast. Who's going to win at the end of the day? And the funny thing is, which app are you going to want to use? You're not going to use your own app, let's be honest, right? You've got this other awesome app that's really quick. So the design is really important. Your code is really important. The functionality that your code exposes is extremely important. But the experience is topped off by performance. How performant your app is. So let's see if we can improve this a little bit. Let's see if we can do it. Now, I'm not as good as Sean is. I have a lot of cheat sheets. I'm sorry. And actually, it was actually great because Ben was keeping me honest last time, so I've actually added a bit to the demo because it was a little too complex to do on the spot. Oh, and I didn't have IntelliSense last time, so I was kind of really cheating. Yeah, let's see if we can clean this up a little bit. Okay, can you guys read that? Okay, so my code is really simple. Right? What I have here is my XAML. Everyone's seen XAML before, right? It's like XML, similar to HTML. It's not like XML, sorry, it is XML, so it's strict XML. And it defines what's going on. So I have I have my resource, I have a couple of styles that I'm applying. I have some fonts that I'm using. These are the standard things. And I have my layout route. This is where things get kind of interesting. This is like my app starts here basically. And this is just a standard panorama app, right? So I've got this, it all came from the standard like startup, file, new project, panorama. I have a title, I have my images, I have some controls. I have my template. So here's the main list. So this is the list box for the current news. So it has, it has an image, and then it has a text block with the actual text from the thing, etc. And I can keep going. There's another panorama item. This one has all the subreddits, so it's just a stack panel with some images. And then I have another panorama item. Oh, this one's really interesting, and we'll talk about this quite a bit. Is the wrap panel. So it's just a great example of a very useful list that's very low performance. So it's the panorama, that's what does the pictures. So the pictures come in and they wrap. So instead of a list box where it all goes down, here when it hits the border side, it drops down and starts a new row. Okay, that comes from the toolkit, by the way. That's what Sean showed you guys how to where to download it from right at the end of his slides. And then at the end I have this about. Yeah, that's nothing, that's just for fun, right? So there isn't really much going on here. So what happens when I start up? So this is what I was talking about. So in your main page constructor, this is happening during your startup. Any code done here counts towards your startup. The more code you do here, the slower your startup is. Do things on the UI thread, Watchdog kills you. It's as easy as that. So what am I doing? Well, I'm setting the data context to my view model. So I have a view model. I'm not a big MVVM guy, but if you guys are, feel free to do it. So you have these views and models. Data context is just for binding. So binding is basically in XAML where I have like text binding data title. That just means it's a really neat way. Instead of me having to write in code, you know, this text block doesn't have a name, but let's assume it had a name called awesome text block. So instead of me having code having to do awesome text block dot text equals something, I can just say, hey, bind to the title. And then if I change the title later on, it's really easy for me to say, hey, raise a notification that says the data title changed and update that. Okay? Standard Silverlight feature. So I set my data context so that all data comes out of there. I have a loaded event handler, which I bring up, that's down here. I look for some property changed, just so that we can, so basically what I have is, I have a property changed event that says, hey, I've finished loading this stream, or hey, I've finished loading this stream. So the important thing to note is that Reddit, when you download this app from Codeplex, it's written not bad, it's not written badly. The code itself is not slow. There's nothing slow in the code, but there's patterns that haven't been done. And I'm setting a tilt effect. Okay, so that's fine, that's the app. Here's what I do on property changed. So I go through all the different submissions and I add them into the wrap panel. That's it, when we're done. That's all just comments at the bottom. So that's the whole app. Obviously there's a whole other library here that you can check. You know, all these little bits and pieces in Reddit to parse out the JSON. There's nothing interesting in there. Sure, I might be able to optimize and make it 10 milliseconds faster. It's not interesting. It works, and it works well. Right? It doesn't take 5 minutes. So what I have established by looking through my code is that startup cannot be any faster. I might be able to knock off 20 milliseconds. User doesn't notice that. So let's go back to my very first slide. What is performance? It's a magician's trick. So what kind of magician's trick can I do to make my startup faster? I already hinted at it right at the beginning. But yeah, no, shush. Come on, someone, anyone.
Display another thing. Distract.
For the people that are listening in, I'm like doing, you know, a more symbol with my hands. Oh, I have one thread that parses the data. Don't do what?
Intensive work in those startup events.
Sure, but then, okay, fine. So that might delay my startup a little bit, but at the end of the day, my data is not going to come up faster. So I've established that to get my data to display, I can't do it any faster. So can we think of a way to make it faster without actually making it faster? That would make it faster. And you'd get stale data. Yes?
So only load the data when the user requests it.
But he has requested it because he started it up. No. It's like going to a website.
You want to view the pictures. I don't load those pictures.
Sure, the pictures actually, to be honest, are loaded afterwards anyway. The pictures are only loaded once it started up. And when I started panning, remember when I was panning and it wasn't displaying? That was because the app has completely started up. So the watchdog already is not even looking at me. And then I start loading the images. So the images are already on loaded, delayed. Yes?
Display a loading page until.
All right, I like the way you're thinking. Display a loading page. Yes.
Display just the pictures as you load them.
Okay, and we will get to that for the pictures. But again, the pictures are not affecting my startup. They're affecting my usability after the startup. They're the reason I can't pan when startup starts, but they're not affecting my startup at all.
Yeah, you're actually putting an event handler and you're displaying something else, right?
What do you mean?
Finish.
Sorry.
like this load, you're putting a main page loaded.
Sure.
So that would actually go in.
Loaded happens before it renders. Loaded is, hey, I'm ready to go. Do you need anything last minute? Before I throw up on the screen.
Yeah, so.
So loaded is
that would
before.
happen asynchronously, right?
Synchronously. UI thread callback.
That is asynchronous.
Sure. So when I say this.loaded, I'm saying, hey, UI thread, when you're loaded and ready to go, call me back.
Yeah, call me back, yeah.
But it calls me back onto the UI thread. One last one. There was someone. I saw in a hand. Yes. Hey, you got no food anymore. Sorry, I'm not listening to you. Yeah. Yes.
Have another thread loading while running.
So we kind of do that already. Okay, I'm going to go back to the loading screen idea. So what I'm going to do is, you saw the splash screen? Why not add a progress bar into that splash screen which says, hey, user, I know you really want your Reddit. What's that meme? But I'm going to hang on. Anyway, whatever. I know you want your Reddit, but you're going to have to wait 2 seconds while I load it for you in the background. Or 1 second, as is the case. And I'm going to show a progress bar. Right? Does that make sense? So all your ideas are great, but what you'll see when you get the code is that those ideas already exist. I'm already doing the HTML on a background thread. The JSON, actually. I'm parsing the JSON on a background thread. All of that stuff's happening, but at the end of the day, to construct my panorama, to bring up some of the extra items, to bring in the initial image list, all that stuff happens during startup. Now, I'll give you an extra bit. I don't want that to happen after the user starts up, because I want the user to see my panorama full of data. I don't want my data to start. I don't want my game to start up, my app to start up, sorry. I don't want it to start up and then show me all these progress bars. Here, I'll give you an example. And I'm sorry to rag on the developers of this app, but I use it all the time because it has pretty graphics, but at the end of the day, it's pretty bad. Check it out. What do I want to do now when I hit the 18-degree tile? What do I want to do? What? This one. The one that has a little bit of rain. This one that tells me that summer started yesterday in Seattle and finished this afternoon. What do I want to see when I tap on that tile? Weather. I want to see the weather. I want to see what's going on, right? Let's see what happens. Okay, I have a splash screen. That's great. Ooh, the splash screen's a little long, but that's fine. I can wait because the data's loading in the background. Huh. Okay. Well, that's fine. I just want to see the forecast for tomorrow. Come on. That was actually responsive. Usually, here, look at that. And did you notice that the forecast said Wednesday? But it's Thursday today. It should be Friday. No, because it's using cached data. Oh, there we go. Popped up. I'm sorry. That's not a good experience. Sure, it kind of responded. Did you see that I managed to catch it just at a point where it was responsive and it went to forecast? No, that's not good. Here, I'll give you another example, by the way, just if I'm already here and demoing. This is an example of what not to do with sleight of hand. Check this out. This is an awesome game. It's a lot of fun. Come on. This is a really slow phone, by the way. It's an engineering phone, so that's why your phones are faster. So this is really one. I keep it on my phone solely for demos. So it's called Fruit Ninja. You guys all know it. And it comes up. And it's loading, and it's a game. So games, to me, get a free pass automatically. I'm happy to wait 10 seconds for a game to load. I want to see that it says loading, so I want to see this loading thing, but I'm happy to wait. Right? That's fine, because it's loading. It's a big game. It's going to load all the textures, and then it's going to be buttery smooth once it's started up, right? So did you guys notice how long that took? It was 10 to 12 seconds, something like that. Okay, now check it out. Come on. Yeah, I really want to quit. Yes. I'm sorry. Okay, this is not performance. Yes, I do want to quit. Quit. Okay, I didn't pay for the app, so I'll give them a 4 on that one as well. Okay, now, check this out. So it's 12 seconds, right? Let's see if you guys can count with me. So Fruit Ninja comes up, the initial splash screen comes up, all right, and we have 1 second, 2 seconds, 3 seconds, 4 seconds, 5 seconds, 6 seconds, 7 seconds, 8 seconds, 9 seconds. Anybody notice anything? It was way faster. Do you know why? Why does that make it faster? This is hilarious. We had to figure this out. This one was, someone logged a bug, and they're like, if I tap on the splash screen while it's loading, it's faster. Woo! We're gonna again, all user thing. You open up your Windows Phone, the first thing you see when it comes up, tap on splash screens to make them go faster. So we're looking at it. Do you know what they do? They've loaded They're started up, but they want you to see their loading screen. So they have it showing there for over 10 seconds because it's on a timer. But the developers, when they developed the app, and these guys are awesome, right? The app is pretty cool. They didn't want to wait every time they debug. So what did? They put in an escape clause. Hey, if input interrupts, cancel the timer. That's what we call an anti-pattern. That's the opposite of what I want you guys to do. So we have the two extremes here. We have the one guy who's hiding his loading screen behind a loading screen, but then he's like forcing you, no, I want you to know I'm working for you. And then we've got this other guy who's like, no, I don't need a loading screen. I start up really quickly, but in reality, he doesn't. So Reddit, this Reddit app that we've got here, it's kind of somewhere in the middle. It's displaying something, but not everything, but it's still taking a bit of a while, and it's delaying some of the load, which is not good because then the performance isn't there. So let's go and let's see if we can implement, yeah, I know you're connected. That's good. Good boy. All right. Let's see if we can implement some kind of layer. And this is a nice little trick, but it's a really nice magician's trick. You saw the splash screen, right? We have the splash screen image in our project, right? Because we created it. It's mine. You can see it right here, just in case you don't believe me. All right? It's there. So I can use that in my app. So why don't I show the splash screen image after the splash screen image, and then only get rid of the splash screen image when I want to? Right? Why don't I control the splash screen image so that the splash screen image shows up when I want it to show up? Well, so it goes away when I want it to go away. So to do that, we'll need to add the splash screen image into our XAML. So this isn't a XAML course, so I'm cheating. All I've done is one thing. I've created a stack panel, right? It's a panel that I can put controls in and it stacks them, so one on top of the other. And I've put two things into it. I've put an image. Can anyone guess what that image is? Yeah. I've put an image, and I've put a progress bar. Now you'll notice that it's the performance progress bar from the toolkit, so that's the one that's tied completely to the compositor. So it's the one that animates beautifully, so that we don't see it going to. And I've set it to is indeterminate equals true, so that's those dots that animate, because the progress bar also has a fill up mode where you say, go from 0 to 100 and I'm going to update you and then it's going to fill up slowly, which is really useful for stuff like downloads, for example. And then I'm going to display it. But I'm going to do another trick. I'm going to hide the panorama. So I'm going to set visibility equals collapsed. So there's two visibility states, collapsed and visible. Collapsed means don't show it to me, obviously. It's collapsed. So I'm going to hide the panorama, right? And I'm going to show the splash screen. So let's see what happens. While this is loading, because this is taking forever, what did I forget? Yes, on purpose. But what did I forget? So I have this awesome screen. There's my splash screen. There's my progress bar. Can you see it down the bottom? What did I forget? Okay, before that. Did you see that there was no flicker between the splash screen and my splash screen? That's because we do that on purpose. We draw behind the splash screen, then we get rid of the splash screen. So if you draw your splash screen behind the splash screen, what are you going to get? Your splash screen. Right? And it's a really neat trick that you can use in all your apps to have startup continue, like to have the splash screen show for a little longer, but actually show a bit of interaction. Now, if you notice something weird, the app hasn't loaded. Why? Because I have a splash screen and I have dots and I haven't told it to get rid of it. So let's see if we can do that again. So we have these eventing models. And I remember I have an event. I was smart. When I created my model and I said, okay, download this stuff off the internet, I had a little callback that I said, hey, I'm finished loading if you're interested. And I hooked that up, if you remember, here. Property changed. I call it property change. You call it loaded, you call it whatever you want. For me, it was property change because then I can get separate notifications on every bit of the view model as it changes. So I know that there is a property called submission list, and the submission list is the list of it's this list of news articles, and I'm going to say, okay, cool. When the submission list comes up, what I want to do is, someone hasn't heard of block commenting. When the submission list comes up, I want to make my panorama visible. I want to make my loading stack collapsed. I want to hide it. There's my magician's hand, the sleight of hand. And I want to do that. Does anyone know why I want to do that? Can anyone see that? So I want to make progress bar dot is indeterminate equals false. Anyone know why I need to do that? Let's not do that. Who cares about the progress bar, right? So let's see what it looks like now. Anybody that wants to nod off, feel free to leave. I'll be finished in 10 minutes though. All right, I'm compiling, deploying. There it is. And there's my progress bar. And my app. Sweet. Okay, that looked a little bit better. The list, as you can see, was there straight away. But I have a question. Remember those friendly counters that I was talking about before? So there's something weird about the friendly counters. The friendly counters are always there when you're debugging. They're on by default. You can turn that off in your template, but by default, when you press F5, they're going to be there. Now, remember what I said about if the app is doing nothing and the user's not interacting with the app, what happens to the UI thread and the composer thread? They turn off, right? They stop. Okay. But anybody remember what the second one is? UI thread. So it's ticking. Does anybody know what's ticking? Bingo. The progress bar is still animating dots in the background. Do you know why it's animating dots? I never told it to stop. So here's the obvious question. Well, Silverlight knows it's not drawing on the screen, so why is Silverlight updating it? Anybody got a question? Anybody know the answer? I only ask that because people like to rag. Oh, it's the framework's fault. One sec. Yep. Okay, sure.
The line that you command?
No, that stops it. Yeah, that stops it. But why is it animating now? It's not on the screen, right? I can't see it if I zoom out here. It's not there. It's not. The progress bar is sitting, you guys can see it, around there, right? That's approximately where it was. And it's animating like crazy. These dots are flying. So why hasn't Silverlight said, hey, I'm smart enough to know that it's not drawing. Why haven't I stopped it? Food guy.
It was collapsed.
It was what?
Collapsed.
Sure, that's right. It's collapsed. So why isn't Silverlight stopping the animation?
Yeah, it's ready for you to set up the visibilities.
Beautiful. That's the second bingo for tonight. Silverlight doesn't know what you want. You've told it to animate. From its point of view, you're animating a progress bar that's filling up. It doesn't know that it's a progress bar. It doesn't know what it is. From its point of view, you're animating something that has to be done, and it has to be done within 20 seconds, because at 15 seconds, you might show it again, like the user might press a button to show it again, and they're going to want to see the state that it was in, that it should be in after 15 seconds. So Silverlight optimizes here. It's not pushing those pixels to the GPU. It's not the GPU, from its point of view, there is no progress bar. But from Silverlight's point of view, it's like, oh, you told me to animate, so I'm going to animate, because if you now uncollapse that, you're going to want to see it where it's supposed to be for the amount of time that it's been animating. So you have to keep that in mind, because often what will happen is you're just going to hide something, and you're not even going to think about the fact that, oh, actually, I kind of needed that. So if I jump back into code very quickly, we can obviously disable that. So setting is indeterminate stops the animation. So now I have another thing. Did you guys notice that when I flicked the list, first of all, the list didn't come, it took a while to come up. When I flicked it, it was completely blank for a long time, and then all these images and text came in. So what's happening there is I'm loading images and I'm loading text. Now the text comes in on the UI thread and it says, hey, render what's new. So UI thread says, hey, cool, I know how to render text. That's really easy. Load the TTF, pixels. But then I'm saying, hey, I've got these 20 images for you. I want you to decode all of them and render them. Now, it's going to do all of those as quickly as possible on the UI thread. Now, I've added them in all at once. So the UI thread is going to be what? It's going to be blocked, because it says, you told me to render 20 images. I'm rendering 20 images. So what we can do is we can give a hint to the UI thread, and we can say, hey, UI thread, I've got these images to come in, but I don't need them to pop in as soon as possible. They can wait a bit. Let's do them on a background thread. So let's go down to my image. Just to prove that I can, just to prove that I can't, I'm going to try and do it without my cheat sheet. It's not going to work. So here's my image, right? This is the image that I was looking at before. Visual Studio keeps moving this back for some reason, so we're going to ignore it. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to change this. I'm going to break out the image, and I'm going to say all I want is an image with no source. But we need the source because we need an image, right? So I can break it out in XAML, and I can say, give me a bitmap image. URI source equals, oh no, there it is. So I'm saying break out the source. So what's happening here is we have a thing called the parser. The parser comes along, takes your XAML, and it says, hey, I'm going to create all these objects for you. And you've said image source equals this thumbnail. Now the parser is smart enough to say, hey, source is actually a bitmap image. So I'm going to create a bitmap image for you, stick the source into it, and show it. But that doesn't give you a lot of control over the source, does it? All it gives you control over is the URI. So what I'm saying is, no, I'm going to specifically say I want to set a bitmap image, and I'm going to specifically say that the URI source is that. And then I'm going to say, bitmap image, let's set some properties on bitmap image. Actually, I'm pretty sure that we updated this. Yes, sorry. I'm going to set some properties, but I'm going to set them nicely. So I'm going to set some create options. And hey, I now have some options that I can do to determine how the UI thread will create this bitmap for me. And I have this really neat one, which we added in Mango, called background create. And what that does is it says, hey, here's this image. Do whatever you need to do with this image. I don't care. But do it on a background thread. Do it nice and slow. Take as long as you want. When you're finished, draw it on the UI thread. And then we have a lot less impact. I will compile. Wow. I honestly didn't think I'd be able to do that. Anyway. And let's see what it looks like on the device. So up comes my screen. Here's my progress bar. You'll notice that the counter will stop moving as soon as the progress bar is gone. Did you see that it stopped moving? Oh, we're still loading some stuff. Okay, we're done. Did you see the images popped in instead of being there? And now when I flick my list, you see that it blanks a little bit still, but it blanks way, way less. Before I managed to get a whole screen out of one blank, out of one flick. And we can optimize this more, and we're not going to move into it, not too much. This is actually just because of the amount of text I'm sticking into it. But you can see that's loaded. Now, we haven't solved everything. This is what Ben pointed out last time, and I was trying to hide it, and yeah. You remember me? I'm the guy who really likes his pictures. I don't care about what's new. Now, the app developer, he didn't put in a thing for pictures, to jump to pictures straight away. So I'm going to get to my pictures. So I got to my pictures, right? But you saw how long it took me. And you saw the frustration in my finger. And you feel, the user feels that frustration, trust me. Anybody that's used a mobile app knows what I'm talking about. It doesn't matter what system you're on. Every mobile app, somewhere you've run into it. Now, let's apply that same thing, that same pictures, the same idea of the pictures. Let's decode those in the background. So here is where I go through and I say, okay, for every submission in the picture submission list, I'm finishing, I promise. What we're going to do is very quickly, we're going to say, okay, add create options, create the background options. So now these images load in the background. Okay, exactly the same, but this time instead of creating it in XAML, I happen to be creating my stuff in code. So everyone has a URI, it has a border, it has a new image, create the bitmap image, set the create options, add the child, add it to the wrap panel. So now it's loading on the background thread. Let's see if that helped. Come on. So it was a little better, right? But it wasn't perfect by a long shot, right? It was still better. I didn't get really frustrated, but it was still stopping. Can anyone guess why? Anybody?
The text was still drawing on the front page.
Text was drawn already.
Oh, it was.
Yep, definitely. I can show it again. Here, actually, this time I'll do a deploy so that you can't even say that it's the debugger. You don't know how many times people have said, hey, I know why you're slow. It's because you're running under debugger. Sorry. It's not that. The debugger does slow you down, obviously, because it's debugging. But all right, so the text is there. The images are there. OK, I was waiting too slow, and now things are cached. But let's assume that the images are not there. It doesn't matter. Actually, the images don't matter because they're running on a background thread, those first ones. So the text is there. I'm going to start moving when the text is there. Anybody notice something funny about the pics? Actually, that was a really good thing. Did anybody notice something funny about how they loaded? all at the same time. So it's waiting for all of them to load before it lets you go. Sure, but why is that? I didn't tell it to do that. It's actually how I'm adding it. So let's take a look very quickly at my code, and we'll finish with this. I get this callback on the UI thread that says, hey, my property changed, right? So my code goes and says, hey, that's awesome. I've been waiting for that to happen. Let's start adding things into the wrap panel. What thread am I on right now? Perfect. So I'm on the UI thread, and I'm saying, hey, I've got like, I don't know what there's like 30 images there, whatever, however many there are in there. I'm going to add them all in the UI thread. So as quickly as possible, let's create a border, let's create an image, let's create a bitmap image, let's set them to background, and let's add them into the UI thread. Now this is happening in one UI thread tick, right? So the UI thread, it ticks as it's working, and the tick says, okay, run user code. Okay, the user goes in and it says, hey, add all these things to the visual tree. User code's done. The UI thread says, hey, draw the visual tree. Whoa, I have like 60, actually in this case, I have like 90 new controls to render, right? Because I have my border, I have my image, and I have my bitmap image within it, and I've got to add them into the wrap panel. Whoa! But it says, hey, you told me to do that, so that's what I'm going to do. And it slows down. Because as fast as Silverlight is and as optimized as it is to add controls, if you add too much into it, it's going to die. So we have a very quick fix. Do you guys mind spending like 2 minutes running through it, or I can just copy paste the code? All right. There's no way I'm going to be able to do this like directly, but we'll try. What I'm going to do is this. I'm going to spit this out onto a separate thread. Now, that's not necessarily as easy as it sounds, because all of these things require that I be on the UI thread. Does anybody know why? Because they're interacting with the UI. I'm creating UI controls. So to create a UI control, you have to be on the UI thread. So catch-22, right? No. What we're going to do is this. I'm going to break out the whole thing into a new thread. So I'm going to say thread t equals new thread. And I'm going to say, what are we going to call our function? I don't know. Load pics. Okay? And then I'm going to say thread start. And then, I never know how to use this exactly, but there is a, it's supposed to be a feature here called refactor. There we go. Extract method. Yes, I missed a thing. Okay, what did I call it? Load pics. Usually I use cut and paste, to be honest. And I'm going to get rid of this call because obviously I don't want that. It's obviously that's in the thread start, right? So basically all I've done is I've created a new user thread, and you can create background worker, whatever. You can create whatever type of thread you want. At the end of the day, they're all going to be the same thing. But the one big thing that you can do is use like the thread pool. Then you're restricted by the number of threads you are, but you know you're not overloading the system with too many threads. So that's just the way how you manage your threads. All threads are background. You have no control over that. There is nothing you can do to make a thread not background. There is an isBackground property, and I love the MSDN documentation. This property is ignored. Don't believe me? Look it up. Bing it. All right, so we have this load pic. So now it's happening. This is happening on a background thread. If I run this, it will crash. Trust me. Believe me, it'll crash. Why? Because it's running on the UI thread. I can show you what it looks like. It's like, it'll crash. And now it won't crash. It'll be awesome. And yeah. Come on. Don't embarrass me now. It's not crashing. But there are no images either.
Are they throwing an exception inside that thread and therefore it isn't being caught?
The debugger should catch that, but it might be that with these tools it is not. Let's see if we can see what's going on. Oh, here we go. They are all here. I don't know why this. I might have mucked around with my debugger settings. Can you see all these unauthorized access exceptions down here? Unauthorized access means one thread is trying to interact with another thread and doesn't have the access to do it. It can't. It's not allowed. You cannot. There is one way to interact with the UI thread, and we'll see it in a second. Okay, so let's stop this, and let's see if we can fix this. So what I'm going to do is, I'm going to say for each submission. Now that is problematic. For each on a background thread, if I'm modifying the background, the collection for each will fail, also with an unauthorized access exception. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to cheat. You can do it with all sorts of locking and cool things, but I'm just going to cheat very quickly. Actually, I can't use I, so for current equals 0, because I use I down the bottom. Just zoom in. Current is less than app, view model, pick submission list count, and car plus plus. All right, so I'm just going to iterate like that because then it doesn't require locking the object. And now I need my submission. So submission. Okay, so now I have code that's essentially exactly the same as it was before. But what have I forgotten? I don't need to initialize it, but I never set it. So you need to either initialize or set it. So the compiler its branching logic is smart enough to determine that there is no way that you're ever accessing the variable without using it or initializing it. So submission equals app, view model, picture submission list, and then car. Okay, so the compiler now will be happy because it says, oh, there's no way you're using submission without that. So I go in, I go through. And essentially the code is exactly the same as what it was before. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to take advantage of a little trick called the dispatcher. And I'm going to say dispatcher.begin invoke, and I'm going to use lambda expressions here because I can't be bothered writing another function and there's no need to. And I'm going to say invoke all of this code in the dispatcher. And what the dispatcher says is, hey, take all this code and shuttle it over to the UI thread and run it on the UI thread. Now I've still got the same problem. So I've got this background thread that's shuttling as quickly as possible, heaps and heaps of code. It's still going to run in the same tick because all that code is going to queue up.
It's called not continuously.
But it is going to be continuous because the for has, it runs as quickly as possible. So the for runs bang, 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 queue, 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 and the UI thread comes up and it's got 30 dispatcher things called queued up.
Right, but it's still on a background thread, so
but not the dispatcher. The dispatcher moves all of the code in here onto the UI thread. This is a standard pattern, by the way, like for UIs, is this one way to move your code onto a background thread, from a background thread onto UI thread. But because I'm on the UI thread, I'm on a background thread, I can slow myself down, right? I can do something that says, hey, I don't go so fast. Exactly. And this is where sleight of hand comes into play. I am intentionally slowing down my code. But by slowing it down, even if I sleep by a very small amount, and I'm going to sleep by a large amount just to show you what it looks like, the actual effect, but even by a small amount, it says, hey, yield to the UI thread. Even if you do a thread sleep 0, it basically means, hey, my thread is done for now, schedule someone else instead of me, and then come back to me as quickly as possible. Exactly. But first thing is, a little quirk of the... just a very small quirk of the dispatcher is actually I could actually put the dispatcher into the try, but okay, I'm not going to do that. I'm just going to copy the variable over so that I have a local copy. So I'm actually going to call that submission original, and original. Because otherwise what's going to happen is when that code runs, it's all going to get the same submission. You're going to get all of them are going to have exactly the same picture. So then the last thing I need to do, just compile and double check, is right at the end of the dispatcher call. And I'm going to sleep for a quarter of a second. It's just a nice number.
That's slow.
What?
That's slow.
Low?
Slow.
Yeah, but I want to visually be able to see the effect of what I'm doing so that you guys can to see that I'm not tricking you. Let's say it like that. So I bring it up, and my app starts up. And if I've copied the code correctly, okay, it's deserializing, and I move across, and it reacts immediately. Oops, that was me actually not swiping. And you didn't even notice that it took 250 milliseconds to load every single one of them. That was your thing from last week. Mm-hmm. So these are games. Hey, you might want to wait 30 seconds. Nope, okay. Does anybody know her? All right. You can throw it to her afterwards, if anybody does know her. All right. So I'm going to finish with that. The slides have a bunch more general information on them. There's a bunch of other stuff in there. There's some pain points, just different things to run through to look at. It's very hard in a performance talk to cover every single thing because every app is unique. Feel free to email me if you have any questions or anything. 60 frames a second is the goal. If you're at 45, the user won't notice the difference. You're good. If you're at 30, work on it. On the compositor thread, UI thread, you're fine. I'm done. Feel free to stick around, ask questions, etc. Grab a t-shirt, grab things. I don't have that many t-shirts actually. Unfortunately, I was a little bit disorganized relative to last time where I had like 300 shirts. But we have a few things. Hey, dude in the blue, catch. All right. AT&T or Verizon? Oh, T-Mobile.
Me?
Yeah, you.
Sprint.
Ah, crap. Yeah. Come talk to me afterwards. AT&T or T-Mobile? AT&T. I'm not throwing this. Come and get it. All right, I'm done. I am throwing it. There you go.